Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sacred Symbols Plus. I'm your host today, Dustin. And today we're doing a spoilercast and review discussion of Alan Wake 2. And I've gathered a panel of experts here. Let's go down the line. I'll just do what my Zencaster says. Starting off, Ben Smith. Hello.
Hello.
Also coming from the dark place, like I am here.
I'm usually in the dark place. I actually just turned on the background lights. I normally work in complete dark, which is great for my eyes, I'm sure. But you know, I'm not suffering yet. So I think that like the male way is to not deal with a problem until it becomes a problem,
especially medical,
right?
You know,
like solely medical, really. Yeah. So that's my kind of go-to here with the dark place.
We have moving along here, Gene Park, who speaking of medical, I mean, you did deal with the medical issues, and now I mean that's a good thing. I'm just saying, if that would happen to Ben and I, would happen to you, we might not be here. So that's a compliment. But Gene,
well. It got as bad for folks who don't know. To catch people up, I had cancer. So
yeah.
To Ben's point, it only got so bad because I was trying to, be a man, I guess, and just ignore it until it got worse, and it got to the point where it was completely. I was unable to ignore it. So
right,
yeah.
But didn't they tell you had like
don't do what I did
too?
and get yourself checked early, guys.
Yeah,
certainly.
What are you saying, Ben?
They were telling you had something else entirely. That just happened with my mother-in-law, where they were like, "No, it's nothing serious," and she ended up having cancer. Didn't they tell you had long COVID or something at the beginning?
Well, that and also hemorrhoids too.
Yeah, yep.
And then I was like, I don't think this is hemorrhoids anymore, you guys.
Yeah. Don't trust your doctors, people. That's my advice.
So I saw a gastroenterologist, and they were like, "No, you're about to die."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh shit, okay."
Yeah.
Damn.
Anyways, that was the dark place for me, but I'm now the champion of light. Look at how
that's
bright
right, dude.
That's right. The medical boys are the light room.
Yes, Mr. Hoeg.
I was going to say, moving along here, we have the one and only Rick Hoeg. Also, recently, not that we're going along medical issues here on the podcast, but I mean, it is kind of like the string of what we've been talking about. But Rick, obviously, I'm so excited in a serious note to have you here because you are Alan Wake. You've changed your name legally to Alan Wake. You're the Alan Wake man, to my understanding. So I'm so glad we can have you on to talk about this game that we've been waiting for over a decade.
I love Alan Wake 1 so much, and it was such a surprise and a delight to be able to play a sequel that basically lived up to what I would have hoped for from Alan Wake. And so I am just thrilled to talk about it all with you guys because there's so much to talk about with this game, especially in a spoiler cast. I've gotten to talk about it where you can't say anything about the game in other venues, and it's a really hard game to talk about while trying not to trip over spoilers.
Well, let's stick with you.
For us, this is going to be therapeutic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hoeg, let me read you this introduction question. I took some feedback and questions from the audience as well. I'll try to fit as many as I can in here, but just to, get us warmed up with our overall feelings and thoughts, I have this write-in from Mortifying Milkshake, who says, "What's up, boys? Alan Wake 2 is my game of the year for 2023. I've played nearly every high-profile release this year, and nothing has surprised and delighted me more than this game. It's expertly crafted, and Sam Lake's direction and zany direction have left an lasting impact on me as a gamer. From the well-written characters and setting, the atmosphere of the dark place, and unique game mechanics like the Mind Place, Writer's Room, and of course, the We Sing chapter. Do we have any similar feelings after rolling credits? Where does this game sit with you at the end of the year? And do you think it elevates Sam Lake to Kojima likes of authorship?" Now, I want to give a warning before you answer, Hoeg, just because I know that some of our episodes have spoiler free at the beginning. We're not doing that. We're just diving right in. We've talked about Alan Wake so many times on Sacred Symbols, and this is the bonus episode. So we're going straight into spoilers. Turn this shit off if you haven't played it.
And, really do. It's one of my favorite games of the year, so please don't get spoiled on it if you can avoid it.
Yes, absolutely. So without further ado, Rick, what do you think about, overall everything? And,
I think,
that's write-in.
I think Alan Wake 2 is art. I think that the notions of that write-in email are correct, that I played this, and I was actually pre-roll of the credits where I was about 3/4 of the way through, and I was listening to one of the chapter songs after going through a bit of the plot, and I said to my daughter, who was playing with me, and that's not a recommendation for parents out there. This is a pretty gory, pretty language-filled game, but my daughter is a little bit older than her years and absolutely loves thought puzzles and intellectual pursuits. And Alan Wake 2 is a wonderful game to experience with a family member like that. And I was sitting there going, however this ends, and we weren't sure it was going to land the plane because it's a whole bunch of weird stuff happening all at once. However this ends, this is definitely art. The combination of the video, the music, the graphics, the gameplay, all of that coming together in such a weird and interesting way makes the art argument, I think, basically moot in the land of video games. I thought it's been moot for a long time, but Alan Wake 2 is a very difficult game to look at and play and experience and not say, yes, that's artistic expression.
Gene, you just wrote a review of Alan Wake 2. You gave it 4 out of 4 stars, I believe. It's not 5 stars at Washington Post, right?
No. We're traditional. We're a traditional newspaper, and traditional newspapers have done it 4 out of 4 stars. So
yeah. Okay. So I don't understand that.
We
But
used to do 10 out of 10 in the old video game section before that shut down, and I got subsumed into the style, the traditional style section. And then so all the critics, the movie critics there, Pulitzer Prize winning critics, they stick with the 4-star system, and I was like, I could do whatever I wanted, and I was like, I know, I'll just do the 4-star system. That's fine. It's not a big deal. It forces me to be a little bit more considerate in terms of whatever. But unfortunately, I've given a lot of 4 stars this year, so that doesn't matter.
It's
but
a great year for games.
Yeah, I don't consider like I'm not fucking Edge magazine. I'm not Famitsu. like my 10 out of 10s aren't precious. If I like a game, I'll give it a 10 out of 10, whatever. Who gives a shit? So.
Now, I wouldn't give this particular game a perfect score just because I did have some technical issues with it when I played through. I had some end of bosses not fire off into the next cutscene, and after very difficult fights, things like that. But as a game, and I'm sure they get those things cleaned up as it goes along in Patchland, I could not like it more, I don't think. I can't imagine it being a better sequel than what we got.
Yeah, a lot of my thoughts are pretty much summed up in my review. So Dustin, if you could please leave a link into the description, and listeners, if you guys can go, please read it and help your boy out. And give it a click, and also please give it a read too, because it is the clarifying statement on what I feel about Alan Wake 2. And I can clarify it further here at the podcast too. This is a companion piece to my piece. So.
Well, Gene, take it away a little bit. Obviously, I don't want you to just regurgitate your art. I mean, you can to whatever degree you want. You say whatever you want, but you very clearly said Alan Wake 2, Game of the Year, which, as Rick was just saying, that means quite a bit, especially in 2023. So,
and I talk a little bit about it. I would have talked more if I had more space, which is so dumb because newspapers have space a finite amount of space. When it's the internet, there's an infinite amount of space that you can just put garbage into it. But rant over, I did talk a little bit about why I think this is better why I think this should be Game of the Year over Baldur's Gate 3, over Zelda. And I think, for my money, those are the 2 games that are really the competition. And for the record, if Baldur's Gate 3 or Zelda wins, that's fine. I think those are very 2 worthy games to get it. And I would find it hard to argue against Baldur's Gate 3, but my argument against it is the fact that Baldur's Gate 3 is an iterative game. It is the best version of a CRPG. It is the best version of Dungeons and Dragons ever produced for a video game, and that is historically significant considering how long video games have been trying to replicate Dungeons and Dragons for decades. Ultima Online, multi-user dungeons, Dragon Quest, even Zelda. It all goes back to Dungeons and Dragons, and for Baldur's Gate 3 to knock it out of the park and be so expansive and so accurate to the experience, where every freaking decision and every little side character is like this new journey that you can go on. It's incredible. But I still think that it is still within the confines of the genre. And it's ironic to me that Alan Wake, the character, is so obsessed with like, no, it has to stick to the genre. It has to stay true to the genre, as he manically says to himself throughout the game. Whereas this game is not barely staying true to its own medium. And that, to me, is what holds up Rick's, Mr. Hoeg saying about how this is art. For me, as I stated in my review, Alan Wake 2 is proof positive that video games can be every single form of art to ever exist. Because it is not only digital, it is not only visual, it is not only audio. It could be a concept album, it could be a musical, it could be a tell-all memoir, it could be a podcast, it could be TV commercials. I already said concept album, but yeah, it could be a late night talk show, just live action stuff, and it's also a survival horror video game, and we can talk more about that too. But that's why I think Alan Wake 2 is elevated above every single other game that came out this year. Every other game is great, but they are iterative, better versions of what came before. Resident Evil 4 Remake, it is the better survival horror game than Alan Wake 2. If I was gonna judge the better horror game, it would be Resident Evil 4. It would be Dead Space, for that matter too, right? Dead Space is a more fun, better game too, but it is still just a better version of Dead Space. It is still a better version of Resident Evil 4. Alan Wake 2 is completely something different, and that's what makes it unique.
Ben, I know you, like all of us, big fans of Alan Wake, the original game as well, and that's why I wanted to make sure we got you in on this. What are your thoughts overall on Alan Wake 2?
Yeah, Alan Wake, the original, was a game I really had no concept of prior to its release. A couple months after that, a friend of mine handed me the game and was like, "You got to play this." And I was like, "Okay." Like, I'll play anything a friend that I trust recommends to me. So I played it, absolutely loved it. It was unlike many other things I'd played before. Obviously, I had played, other horror games, other games of the genre, I suppose you could say, but nothing quite like it. And I loved it. I played American Nightmare and at least one of the other DLCs. I don't remember which one because I remember watching the other one because I was a broke college student. So I just watched a replay of it. And absolutely loved it. So for years, I thought, that's one of my favorite games of all time. And they did the PS5 remake, and I played, I don't know, 5 or so hours of it. And I don't know if it was just the mood I was in or I was anticipating something else. But at that time, I thought, this isn't as good as I remember. And it just didn't age well for me. And I think I'm probably wrong in that, but that was my opinion at the time. And so when they announced Alan Wake 2, I was like, okay, well, I really liked Alan Wake 1, but now my experience feels a little bit soured since, the remake didn't really hit for me. And I wasn't going to play it at launch. And then all the hype, I usually don't buy into hype, but all the hype, I was like, I have to play it. So played it, absolutely adored it. On the Is It Game of the Year conversation, maybe, I think it's probably my game of the year. I think I tweeted this. It's my favorite game of the year. I don't know if it's the best game. It probably is not the best game, but I think it is my favorite game. And for so many reasons that we've already touched on a little bit, and I'm sure we'll get into more here. But yes, very much a big fan of Alan Wake. I like Remedy. I cannot claim to have played every piece of media they've ever put out, but I've played a lot of them. And I've never.
As it turns out, it's really useful to have played every piece.
It is really useful.
Yes.
Yes. And if you have not played them, at least I did play Control. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like you got enough as it is. Then.
Yeah. It's funny because Dustin and I used to. So for our old website, we had a shared Steam account that we would get review codes and then we could each log into it and play them. And so I played Control, and I know everything that happens in Control. But I don't know 100% of beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm the one who finished it for sure. I think I did because the achievements in there show that it was finished, but I don't know if that was him or I or somebody else on our team at the time. So it's funny because I know that I've seen the Control to the end, but whether I played it the whole way through or not, I don't remember. But either way, yes, there's a lot of backstory there, and there's a lot of stuff you need to get into. And I think that for those who, hopefully, if you're listening still, you've played the game, but for those who want to get more into the Remedyverse as it is, I think every other franchise under Remedy's umbrella plays into this game in some way, even if it's not directly connected. I know that there's been some discussion about whether Max Payne is part of it, and
Max Payne definitely is. Who's discussing it on the other side?
I think he's definitely in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think they said something initially a few years ago that they tried to temper expectations, like, oh, Rockstar owns Max Payne.
Yeah.
But that was before Remake was announced.
Oh, was that before Remake? Okay. Well, either way, all I'm getting at is,
right?
I think
the lawyer here would say that they get right up to the line on things that they don't own. Right? Tim Breaker is a reference to Quantum Break. I would argue that Mr. Door...
Quantum Breaker, right?
Sure, Quantum Breaker.
And
Mr. Door is obviously very similar to Mr. Hatch from Quantum Break. And you have Tim Breaker looking for a red-haired woman. And you have all these various things that speak to Quantum Break. Obviously, Alex Casey, the character, is voiced by the Max Payne voice actor and is face modeled by the Max Payne face actor. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's a part of the story. And since Alan Wake came out, Tom Zane was always kind of a jump off from Max Payne.
Yep.
So they've got all this stuff going in. And that's one of the things I want to talk about with respect to Alan Wake 2, which is that what I think this game does the best, and I think it's my game of the year as well. I have to still think about a few things because I've enjoyed a lot of games this year. But what I think Alan Wake does the best is what I call disorientation, right? So I think when you talk about things that have this kind of clue-based mystery box solving audience, like if you think of TV shows like Lost or other things that you just have an audience online that has a deeply invested kind of presence figuring out puzzles and things, the Remedyverse, Alan Wake 2 in particular, takes that notion and like spins it on its head. If you're interested in following all the clues and listening to all the metaphors and possibilities, then it's going to play with you the whole game, right? So you're disoriented the entire time. And I mean that physically, right? Like the whole game is set up to be in loops and spirals. Mm-hmm. And did I go this way already? But I'm actually progressing. Something new is happening. Is this what's supposed to be happening? And characters say the same thing, mirror that for you, but also in plot points, right? If you're invested in trying to figure out what's happening, Alan Wake shows up in chapter 2. I wasn't expecting that from this game because all of the marketing had been Alan Wake stuck in the dark place and we're going to have to rescue him over the course of the game. He shows up in chapter 2, which for my money is one of the best moments in gaming this year. When Alan Wake shows up, says, I'm a writer, and then Wide Awake plays. I was so pumped in my gaming space. I was like, this is the best. And for those of us that had played it in 2010 and knew from American Nightmare that he was still there, it's like 13 years is real time to us. And he's back and he comes back into the game and they play that music. And I could not have been more thrilled. Felt to me like the end of The Matrix when Neo flies away. Spoilers for The Matrix, I suppose. Apologies.
It's so old. I'm not believing that. It's your fault if you haven't seen The Matrix.
1999. But I was so excited about that. But realistically, the game is just all about keeping you with so much extra information that you don't know where the real plot is, that everything when you get to the end credits, in my opinion, is hidden in plain sight. Like all of the twists, which we can talk about, are always one of the possibilities that you've got in your head for what's happening here. But it's impossible to kind of highlight what they're going to pick until you get to the end. And it's a very interesting way to tell a story. And to me, it's mastercraft, right? It's masterful of, we know people are going to be digging into every tiny thing here. They've been digging into Alan Wake for 13 years. And so we're going to take advantage of that. We're going to put all these red herrings up. We're going to put all these possibilities. But one of my favorites is in the middle of the game, Alex Casey in the dark place has a monologue, an internal monologue like Max Payne, right? He speaks like Max Payne the entire time.
He's wearing his fucking tie, by the way. It's the same outfit. It's the same ugly tie. So he's all but Max Payne in anything but name, right?
Absolutely. And he has a metaphor where he says that I'm in the dark place, right? He's talking about his sadness and depression. And you get all of this throughout the game of, okay, Alice is in the dark place. That's her art. And you can actually have a mental dark place, which Alex Casey talks about. The dark place is a physical reality, but on a meta-contextual level, when we talk about this game, it's like what's real and what's not. And then you're sitting in your living room or wherever you're playing your video game, realizing that, of course, none of it is quote unquote real. You hit the edge of, well, it's actually a video game I'm playing, but it's impossible to kind of figure out what is the dark place, even in the context of the game halfway through. And even at the end, what you got in Alan Wake 2 is effectively The Empire Strikes Back, right? You've got the middle piece, you've got a little bit more understanding of the universe, but you have not kind of completed, in this case, the spiral. And so that's an interesting place for it to be and to be so successful in what it does. But I absolutely love that feeling of disorientation, because when I'm watching a movie or I'm watching a television show, one of the things I'm constantly doing is, okay, well, what would be the best twist? What would be the best narrative for them to do here? And then kind of checking it against the plot as it advances to see what works. And then kind of being in front of whatever's being written or whatever I'm watching, which my wife says is a terrible way to watch things. I enjoy it. My daughter enjoys it. But you do that with Alan Wake, like we did, and you wind up with 400 different versions of what's happening that kind of slowly gets whittled down to one.
I'm just thinking about what the Venn diagram of people who have not seen The Matrix but have played Alan Wake 2 looks like.
Well, I do apologize for that, but that's what it reminded me of.
I think the people who have not, I think they're two separate circles, people who have not played. I mean, I guess that's been 25 years ago now, so who knows?
I'm old.
They name checked The Matrix in the game.
Did they? I don't remember that.
Yeah, Warland Dorr tells Alan Wake, it's like The Matrix.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah,
I remember that now. Yep.
So Alan Wake, the writers are very, very, very well aware of who they're cribbing from and what their inspirations are from anyways, too.
Yep.
Ben, before I say some of my thoughts, I want to make sure if you had everything you wanted to say out.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Just that I wasn't looking forward to Alan Wake 2. I mean, I was going to play it, but then I played it, and it was funny because basically I played it over like a week and a half, and like every day I play games all at night usually. And then the next morning I'd go downstairs and just like sit on the couch, lean back, be drinking coffee, just like staring at the ceiling. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm thinking about Alan Wake." Just thinking about that chapter I finished last night. Just because I commonly do that. I ruminate and think about things I'm playing, but with this one, there's so much more to think about. And then sometimes that wasn't even just like, I need to think about this plot. I need to think about, it was just like, wow, that experience that I just had was really cool. Or I didn't love that experience at first, but now that it's been 12 hours since I played it, I get it now. There's something like that. So that was a cool experience. But yeah, I wasn't looking forward to it, and it totally blew me away. So I'm happy about that.
This is kind of interesting. I didn't expect this, but as someone who loved the game, think it's fantastic, one of the most unique games I've ever played, and one of the best games of the year, I might be the most down on it of the four of us here, and that's saying that I still think it's clearly an amazing
I've got
game.
critiques, don't worry.
Yeah, I have a negatives column on my sheet, but didn't want to open with that.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Well, I'll open with critiques, and why not? Everyone's been saying positive things, but no, I pretty much agree. Particularly, you guys were mentioning about Alan Wake 2 being art, right? And then it's always like, well, what makes Alan Wake 2 art more than any other game, right? And I think that there is something to be said about like, well, the ability to combine all of these different elements of what we consider art, music, writing, live action storytelling through film, interactive medium of video games, all of this comes together into something really interesting. And that's why I would say this is like, without a doubt, one of the most unique games I've ever played. The thing, Gene, that when you mentioned about like why it makes it game of the year over other stuff, the thing that I was thinking is just that the core issue I think I have with Alan Wake 2 is that sometimes I think it just does too much with its story. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a personal critique and something that some people, when they see that they have not a lake, but an ocean of information before them to chew on through this story, that they're going to absolutely
that was deep, Dustin.
Love that. Oh yeah. Do you like the dude? I, just tying that in. Mm-hmm. But there was part of me that I was like, man, I'm trying as hard as I can to pay attention to all these different details and figure out how the mechanics, not the game, the literal play mechanics, but the mechanics of the world even
itself.
Work.
Yeah.
And I am just like, man, I feel lost regularly throughout this game. And even afterwards, trying to go through and like put things together, I like that element. I love after I finish something being able to go to dive in on YouTube to all the different people that are like, let me explain this for you. Let me show you this thing that you might not have thought of. I did that a lot with Alan Wake 2, and I still feel like very confused in a lot of ways. But what I will say, though, is that while that's kind of a negative aspect for me, which I know you could just I'm expecting the comment. It's like, well, Dustin just didn't get it. He's dumb. And that's fine. You can leave that comment.
I think we're all going to get comments about some aspect of the plot. I was thinking about that before we even got onto the show. It's like, I know some commenters are going to be like, oh, well, Alex Casey is related in this way and this and this and this. And it's like, no question, I did not get every single detail that they put into Alan Wake 2. It's almost impossible without those kinds of white paper treatises on YouTube and things like that. But I really do think, Dustin, that you're in good company. I think Disorientation really is the purpose, right? If you want to talk about meta context, it's not just Warland Dorr talking to you on a nightclub set, it is, or on a night show set. It is the notion of, what does Alan Wake feel for the last 13 years? What has been his position? What is that nightmare like? And we're going to put you into a game with rotating stories in both Return and Initiation, and we're going to separate the time frame so you can't even tell what's going on. And we're going to put things in like, hey, if you follow Alan Wake, the first character or the second character you're introduced to is Alex Casey, which, as Alan Wake shows up at the end of chapter 2 and says, wait, am I still in the dark place? One,
what are you doing here? Yeah.
One is a great line. It's a great line. But two, because they're messing with you this whole time, you go, okay, I'm playing a video game. Is Saga in the real world? And then it's like, well, no, she's in a video game. What is the real world to me? It's like, well, it's the highest level of the Inception, whatever it is. And you get all these great conversations, but they start with Alex Casey, and then they kind of slowly reveal out to, no, he's real, right? Like over the course of the game, they know that you're ahead of them on, well, that's an Alan Wake character. What are you doing? And he's saying, oh, well, yeah, it's jokes around the office. And it's like, no, I think Alan might have created you. Like, what is happening here? What is going on with you, dude? And
that was my thought when they were sitting at the car at the beginning. I was like, you are not a real fucking person. You are not in this fucking car. And then throughout the game, I'm like, wait, oh, you actually are. Yeah. You actually might be real. Holy shit, sorry.
It's all of that, right? Like they do that the whole time. What's up with Alex Casey? How does Alan know things from the dark place? And then they kind of lead into this hint of the site, right? You have Saga, who I think at the start has to be a little bit sillier or stupider than you would like her to be as a character, who has this profiling power, which as we're playing it is self-evidently like psychic interrogation and not profiling, right? How do you know where the heart is, hun? How do you know that she found a necklace in the forest? What you think this is intuition, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so there is a moment at the end of the game where it becomes apparent to her that she's got this psychic sight, and it's not as impactful as I would like it to be in like a perfect piece of media, because it's like, obviously, in order for us to play the game, you had to be watching this happen. And every time she gets a wrong answer, she gets manuscript pages, even though she doesn't realize it. She never ties those two together. And there's these interesting beats there that talk about what's happening in a way that the player is in front of, right? The characters are behind you on this stuff. But then the game will go in front of you and it'll surprise you again and again and again. Like my biggest thing with this game was that over the course of its playing time, which for me was longer than I think some, which was like 26 or 27 hours. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get towards the end of the game, because I do think there are problems with the way the game is built and what they want to do with some of the end sequences, certainly for my hand. But just in general, that's what makes it so great, is that you have all these little things happening that are disorienting and make you feel lost. And I don't think you can get around a lot of that stuff. One of the biggest ones, right? And I'll stop talking. I apologize. Is that when I was here to talk about Alan Wake 1, I said, hey, one of my favorite things is, did Tom Zane create Alan Wake? Did Alan Wake create Tom Zane? We can talk about Tom Zane again because there's more there in this story. But one of my favorite things for this particular game is, did the story change Saga's life for the worse? Or did the story make it seem like Saga's life was okay to start out with, and then reality intrudes? There's no way to untangle that when you're playing this game. We can't know until you have an outside perspective, presumably in an Alan Wake 3 or Nightmare 2 or whatever it might be. But those are the fun things to play around with. There isn't an answer to it. It's just interesting to think about, whereas she's constantly saying, oh, you wrote her in, and now my daughter's dead. And it's like, maybe I wrote you delusional to start out with, and everything else is fine. I mean, there's no way to piece that apart as a player, and I love those thought experiments. It's like a cat playing with a ball of yarn, right? The whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Hoeg says is important, that you can't have an answer to everything. And that's one thing that I didn't really say in my review, but I really wanted to, is that the greatest novel of the 20th century is James Joyce's Ulysses. It's considered the most influential book of the 20th century. People still debate what the hell was going on in that book to this day. Nobody really completely understands it, right? Bob Dylan, considered the most influential songwriter of the 20th century and modern art, modern pop music. His song "Desolation Row" or "Visions of Johanna" is "Visions of Johanna," as he said, just about a song about a rain falling on a ladder, or is it about something completely different? Nobody fucking knows. Nobody knows. Everyone's still trying to figure out what the interpretation of that is. So I think what makes it a great piece of art is not that it has all the answers. Mm-hmm. Something that has all the answers is MCU movie, you know.
But I would argue the difference, though, between a song that is like poetic in nature is that you can break apart the language of that and create meaning from it. Where Alan Wake's very specifically like, here's a clicker, here's a light switch, here's these two different worlds. This person was real, and like it's way more. It's like I'm not trying to disprove and say like what you're saying isn't true, but I think that it's like maximal on details and specific mechanics. Like, oh well, Alan Wake, they did the ritual, but he came back in the past. But when he came back in the past, he was Mr. Scratch, but also he is Mr. Scratch.
I get what you're saying, that's too much.
You know what I mean?
That is a lot. I think the point is to be too much, but it is too much. So you're factually correct about that one for sure.
Dustin, I think you're right, Dustin. Oh, sorry, Rick. I think you're right, Dustin, but I think your comparison to a song would be, in relation to Alan Wake, would be similar to if you said, well, the first two verses didn't make any sense, but actually it's the third verse of that song that ties it together. And I think that's the thing here, is that there may still be unanswered things. We know an Alan Wake 3 has got to be coming. But I think that when you look at the big picture, the huge picture, it will eventually make sense as a full story. That just doesn't leave a lot of satisfaction for certain things after the second stanza of the song.
Sure.
I would say I was super disappointed that the ending was what was not the definitive end of the Alan Wake saga. There is a part of me where I was like, yeah, I don't want to wait another 13 years for Alan Wake 3. That's really the deepest part of it. Obviously, we're just coming off from GTA 6, where people are realizing, holy shit, I've lived a third of my life waiting for this fucking game. Yo,
yeah. Well, Gene, so I feel the
Alan
same
Wake
way.
fans and how long we've been waiting, right?
I feel the same way as I did with like Shenmue, right? You don't know how many bites of this apple you get. So if you have a wrap it up. But I do think this is going to be successful enough that Alan Wake 3 is coming. And I would argue story-wise that I think Alan Wake 3 calls into Alan Wake 2 3/4 of the way through the game, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Dustin. One of the things I would critique on the negative side is that I do think I love Alan Wake 2. I think it is my game of the year. I think Alan Wake 1 will continue to be in the top 5 of my favorite gaming experiences of all time. I don't think Alan Wake 2 is actually going to overtake it, because there's a purity in Alan Wake 1, a simplicity to light versus darkness, and the way that it's presented in the kind of action game, really, with horror elements rather than this horror game. And this does overcomplicate things. I think you used the word maximal, and I think it does feel like that. I give it credit for being disorienting, but the way they do that is with too much information. You cannot keep track of it all if you're trying. And it's one of the things, even before I got on this stream, that I was thinking about saying, can I cover all the things I want to touch on here? Because there's a million, and I don't want to overtake everybody's thoughts, because I think all of them are important, and you can take so much in different directions with this game, but maybe too much. I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, so it's funny because I counteracted Gene's point, but now I want to agree with it in a different way, in that if Alan Wake 2 is a song that has a lot of complicated aspects that you cannot understand, you can still listen to it and understand it understand it and appreciate it and be like, man, I like that song. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm at with Alan Wake 2, in that if we're going to keep going with the song analogy, I love the way it sounds. Mm-hmm. It makes me feel something that I've never felt before.
That's it, baby.
And I love that. Alan Wake. No, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, the I will say this. So strong, and then you listen to the music in between the chapters, and the lyrics are fucking reflecting and maybe spoiling the game for you.
I always let those lyrics,
The music between the chapters is so great. One of my favorites is "Follow You Into the Dark," right? And that's the first song that they play at the end of chapter 1. And you hear it the first time, and you are sure that they're talking from Alan Wake's perspective, right?
Right.
And you hear it halfway through the game, and you're sure it's from Saga Anderson's perspective. And you hear it after the game is over, and I'm personally sure it's from all of their perspectives, but there's a big dose of Alice Wake in there.
Yep.
And it's like, what a great song.
Yeah, dude, those songs in between are amazing. I always let those play. So, guys, it's funny, we're at 35 minutes in, and I think we've only talked about Alan Wake 2 on a high level just because it's so, much. It's just great.
So much crap to talk about,
Yeah.
Maybe we can get down deep in the mud like Alan Wake was when we found him outside the lake.
I want to start...
Thankfully with clothes.
Yeah, it was like Nightingale. So
I want to start with this because I think this is one of the main core things to the experience, and that is the dual protagonists of Alan Wake and Saga Anderson, or as she says, Saga Anderson with no R.
It's also one of my negatives.
That's something Holly always point out. She's like, why does she say her name like that? Why?
She does not pronounce most of the R's, and they have her say Anderson a lot. They have her say officer a lot.
Officer.
And
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I mean,
officer.
it's just the actress. It's no problem. And certainly with what they put in the family background is a little bit more helpful towards that, because Washington is a annex of Finland in the Alan Wake universe. But it is a little bit off-putting at the start of the game. And I like the Saga Anderson character a lot.
Yeah.
There's no better training for an American accent than saying Ford Ranger. You have to say Ford Ranger totally fine. And you're like, hell yeah, you sound like.
Yeah, and she would say Ford Ranger.
She would not be able to say it. I don't think
Ford
so.
Ranger.
Because she's saying shit like pot of coffee. I'm just like, dude.
Yeah. So let's read this question from Ali about the tone shifting. We can kind of expand it however we want. But Ali says, one of the things that really stood out to me about Alan Wake 2 was the constant tonal shifts from Saga's thriller-style chapters a la True Detective to Alan's more horror-focused chapters to the totally unexpected but totally awesome Herald of Darkness musical chapter. We will get to that, but So do you think these tonal shifts took away or added to the overall experience? Personally found it to be very refreshing and something I seldom see in video games. I just finished the game a couple of days ago, but I already think it's my personal game of the year for 2023. So I'm going to take this and open this up a little bit to both being about Alan and Saga, switching between them, because something that I was saying on Sacred leading up to this game for a long time was Alan Wake. I mean, he is the character. They named the game after him. And one of the reasons why we love that original Alan Wake, and the thing that I always said on Sacred was, Remedy is making a pretty bold choice by having this game be split protagonists. They need to prove it to me that this is a worthwhile endeavor in terms of the story, which I immediately think that they justified, because it very much makes sense to have someone in the dark place and someone outside of it, especially if the person inside can't get out without someone else. But is Saga the right character? So Rick, you were just saying that you're a fan of her, but
I am.
Take this any direction you want, as far as specifically with the tone shift and the switching between characters.
Sure. So I actually wound up liking the Saga Anderson sections more than the Alan Wake sections. The Alan Wake sections are a little bit more puzzle environment oriented, and Saga Anderson is mostly playing what we would expect Alan Wake 2 to be, right? She's mostly playing the second Alan Wake game, and that's really why I came to the party to begin with. Now, I like what they did in the Dark Place, but Saga Anderson and exploring places and talking to characters and doing these things that you did in Alan Wake 1 matched up more with what I wanted to see. But I think that there are areas in which Alan Wake could have been more prominent, especially early on. I remember the first couple sessions I played joking with my wife and saying, I think I'm really enjoying the game. I believe Alan Wake is in it at some point. And that wasn't entirely fair, because he narrates the manuscript pages you find and whatnot. But I was waiting to see him, and then you see him, and then he's got a completely different gameplay focus. But as for the tone in the game, I will 100% say it added to the experience. But I think one of the reasons you don't see it in games or in movies or in television or really any medium is that it's ridiculously hard to pull off, right? If you talk through the whiteboard of, okay, we're going to play Watery, we're going to play Coffee World, and then we're going to get into a musical number that looks like a Disney pre-show, and we're going to do these things, and it's all going to work in the same game, and it's going to feel fine after you get done with it. Most people would not greenlight that and would not attempt it, because what is that going to feel like when you're done? You don't know. It's like making a recipe it's like making food without a recipe and hoping that it comes out okay and spending millions of dollars to do it. But I do think Remedy is one of the few developers that has kind of the strength of will and notions of what they are able to accomplish that would go, yeah, we can pull that off, and it gets done, and you have never experienced anything like it. Like, I think Gene is right to say Alan Wake 2 deserves Game of the Year, if this is what you're grading on, for its novelty and uniqueness, when Baldur's Gate 3, which I think will win Game of the Year, is the pinnacle of something that already existed. Alan Wake 2, you never played before. My daughter said, I'd like to play another game like Alan Wake 2. I'm like, so would I.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you want me to play next, hon? So it is something that is really
can't even play
special.
Alan Wake 1. Alan Wake is not even, it's not even like Alan Wake 1. Even the gameplay itself is not even like Alan Wake 1.
It's not like Alan Wake 1. And it's so apparent when you jump right in, right? You start out with naked Robert Nightingale before you know his name. And it's clearly going for a different tone, but it's a completely different type of game. Alan Wake 1 is an action game where you're fighting big hordes of monsters and or basic construction equipment, depending on the level. And Alan Wake 2 is, you don't fight hordes, right? For the longest time, two people in the dark woods are going to freak you out. You're going to say, nope, let's go a different direction. Let's find a light. Let's stay there and wait for them to pass. Whatever it is, it's just going to be too much. And then one of the areas that I promised I would get back to that I think is a little bit of a problem is specifically when you get to the end of the game, when you're doing the summoning, which is awesome. I mean, that is the Children of the Elder God level in Alan Wake 2. But when you're doing that and they throw 50 taken at you, I don't think that the game design actually lends itself to that kind of Alan Wake 1 approach to crowds. And I had to play through it a dozen times and it had crashes and I had to redo it. And that might not be for you guys. I might just be the worst game player in the panel here, which is fine. But I think that takes away a little bit of what they were trying to achieve at the end of the game. So I do think they want to elevate things to mobs and fighting like in Alan Wake 1 and kind of reflect that with the Taken. I don't think they always pull that off perfectly.
Gene, what are your thoughts about Saga and the switching, and I guess, opening us up to the tonal stuff too, because I was totally down for the swapping between the two. Once I got started, I was like, okay, this is great, because honestly, I mean, both sides were very scary at times, but it kind of felt like, I don't know, the Saga ones felt like a little less scary to me at points until they weren't. And then, but
until you went to the old folks' home. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. So, Gene, take it away.
Yeah. When I realized that you can switch between the two heroes, I was like, oh, this game isn't just like a good story. This game fucking rules. Like, it's actually a good game that's giving the player a lot of agency in how to tackle the story. And the way the order you decide to tackle them makes a huge difference in how you start understanding the story, especially since when you realize when you get to the end of certain chapters that they're actually, Saga and Alan are actually talking to each other out of order, you know,
yes, and not well.
And not and they're not communicating well, you know. Like Saga is saying like what the fuck have you done with my daughter? And then Alan only hears daughter, and he's like, yes, your daughter. You got to save her, you know. It's like you fucking idiot. You guys can't hear each other. But like the fact that you can just change your order just made this game so much better. And which is why, like, you know, if anyone knows me and how I criticize games or how I value games, it's always gameplay over story, you know. My favorite game of all time is not The Last of Us. It's Resident Evil 4. You know, Resident Evil 4 has the shittiest story of all time, but It is the best game of all time. So that's why I consider it the best game of all time. The story doesn't matter to me, But what makes Alan Wake 2 so special is because the gameplay is actually still good. It's actually, like, for me, they made big Resident Evil 2, which is incredible. They didn't make it as good as Resident Evil 2. It's a lot wider. It's a lot messier. Some of the puzzles don't really fit together quite as well as they do in a Resident Evil game.
You don't like
Resident
doing
Evil
invisible
Village,
light
I think-
math? You don't like doing invisible light math?
Exactly, yeah. The light math, or even the little rhyme puzzles, which were fun to do, and they're cute. They were, quote unquote, the rituals to lead you on, right? So
Aren't they
thematically,
all?
yeah. Well, the entire game is a ritual to lead you on to the end of the game, basically. But at least in terms of tone, though, to tackle the question of tone, I think the game would be a lot less scary if it wasn't as funny too. The TV commercials with Yako and Ilmo.
Oh yes,
Obviously,
giving their thanks to the government.
Exactly. Obviously,
What a great
they're probably the two best new characters in the game, played by the same actor. So it really shows his great range and how much a beard can matter in terms of
things I didn't know. Ilmo and Yako are the same actor.
Yeah, they're the same actor, but that's how much that beard matters. That Yako's beard matters, and also his acting too.
I'm going to shave mine off and become a different person someday. You just wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been this way for 20 years now, so.
Exactly. If Ben, if you shaved your, I was literally just thinking about how beards are just like face lies,
Yeah.
because you could, Ben, if you just shaved your beard right now and like you just showed up at my door, I'm like, who the fuck are you?
I would probably think that too, because I haven't seen myself without a full beard since I was 14. So
that's so bizarre. Like, it'd be a new person. Colin always talks about how he loves his beard, and he talks about how small his face looked back in the day, and it's like, yeah, that's true. Your head does look rather small compared to.
Well, that's my fear, is that my face wouldn't look small if I shaved my beard. That's why I don't shave it. So,
but going back to Ilmo and Yako, like the TV commercials really lighten the mood and the humor. Alex Casey and Saga, even the little ticks of Alex Casey and Saga sipping their coffee at the same time, you really lends a certain character and vibe to the whole story that makes the little things even stranger. You think about the humor in the radio host Pat Maine, and how he keeps insisting that Wendy Davis is not only alive but is selling beef jerky. And one, that made me so hungry for beef jerky this whole game. I really wanted some beef jerky. And two, like, it's really darkly sad and also funny that this man it keeps saying that this woman is not dead. And then you start wondering, going back to is it real or is it fiction? That thing is like, is this man suffering dementia, or is it the dark place? Is it both? Is the dark place also dementia? You never know. But yeah, that's part of the vibe and you never really find out what's going on with Pat Maine, and that's part of the mystery, and that's part of the wonder of this game.
Yeah. Well, and they end on Inception, right? It's you're calling Logan, and nope, you're not getting that, folks.
Yeah. Ben, that drove me nuts.
Ben, I know you and I had a similar issue in that when it came to swapping between the two characters, I found this highly annoying because I didn't like having the option. I thought, please just present it the way that it should be best. I don't want to look on the internet and say, should I play all of Alan's chapters? Should I play all of Saga's chapters? Because when I did look that up, there was a lot of people that said very clearly, you should do them alternating. I'm like, well, why wasn't it? If it's really confusing to just do it with one character at a time, I get that makes sense maybe for repeat playthroughs to give players that option. But honestly, the whole switching between the two, I found it super annoying. Just have them switch if that's the way the story's intended. I'm trying to remember, are you with me with this, or am I making that up?
I think I'm with you on it, in that I would have preferred it be just you tell me how to play and I play that way, and that's the best story. But since we had that discussion a while back, I've been on the Alan Wake subreddit and been all over the place looking around, and there are a lot of people who are like, well, this is the right order because of this, and this is, you wouldn't get this experience if you didn't play it this way. And somebody else is like, well, that's funny because I played it in this order and I got this totally separate angle. So I think that because
you get the twists in a different order.
Yeah, the timeline mixes up, and even within the cutscenes, the timeline is getting mixed up. I think that's part of the gameplay, is actually part of the story there.
Yes.
and that your decision to choose one or the other. Now, with that said, is that the way that I, Ben Smith, as a gamer, wanted to play the game? No, I just want you to give me the next chapter and I'll figure it out from there. But the way I played it, it seems like if I had played it a different way, and maybe there's multiple combinations of that, that would have been lended itself differently. I might have found out about twists and reveals differently and in a different order. And I might have had those conversations between Saga and Alan in a different order. And they would have made more or less sense, I think, depending on what they were. But
you feel one way or another about the two characters, I think, as you realize what they know and what they don't know. Yes. And I think that's really, really smart. So I want to say two things here. One of which is I agree with you mostly, Dustin and Ben, on that. I generally want developers to tell me what their story is. This is why I prefer JRPGs to CRPGs. I don't like to try to build my own good story. I want to know that you're telling me a good story yourselves. I prefer Final Fantasy to Baldur's Gate in general. But in this particular case, I think that the gameplay was different enough that one thing I really liked about it is, okay, I feel like environmental puzzles right now.
Yeah.
Or I feel like figuring out how to get through Coffee World right now is a distinct thing, right? I want to do this. I want to do this. And I think that works really well from a gameplay perspective. On the plot perspective, I think you already nailed it, Ben, which is once you get that last beat of, oh, we did call him, we did summon him, but he arrived in chapter 2, you get all these notions of things that weren't working when you did them, when you thought they were out of order, right? I was trying to keep Saga and Alan at about the same place, which of course doesn't make any sense because Alan is actually sitting
in the same place.
Lodge.
Yeah.
But
they were never in the same place.
I know. Right. But I was trying to keep Saga and Alan in the same place because I thought the game was faking us out with fake Alan. Yeah. And Alan is sitting there in these flashbacks in the dark place. And I wanted them to line up because you do have those scenes where they talk to each other. And Alan's essentially kind of in the past and in the future simultaneously. And when you get the overlaps from Saga, you can try to kind of see where Alan is supposed to be. But then they stop lining up about halfway through because they're moving in different directions, like Benjamin Button style. And so that's a really nice beat to get to the end where you're like, oh, the dark place. When they say that time doesn't work the same in the dark place, they mean it. It's going backwards. It's going forwards. It's going at different rates. And putting the chapters together in kind of an assortment and a melange in the middle of the game brings you into that same space as Alan again. Like, I think all of this goes together to bring you into this place of disorientation and is on a meta level really brilliant, but on a gameplay level, it really works as well.
I think, let me say one real quick thing about the switching.
Please.
Before, the reason why it worked for me, the switching, is because when you switch to a certain character, when you get a certain far enough in that character's like chapter, you have to commit to it. When you're in Coffee World, you can't just switch back to Alan. No, when you're in Coffee World, you are in it with Saga, and you have to finish her fucking Coffee World run before, or otherwise you decide to backtrack all the way back to Bright Falls or Watery and go to the thing there, but you don't want to do that because you're deep in the experience right now. So I think that's how they balance it out, in that you can't just switch back and forth. The game would be worse, and I would think of the game less if they just allowed you to switch back and forth between Saga and Alan. But I think they were cognizant and aware that, okay, like, I think the pacing matters here, in that, you know, if you're deep into Alan's subway, Caldera Street Station tunnel, don't go back to Saga. You can't go back. The pacing is here now. We're revving up the pacing engine, and the ride is going on now, and you can't interrupt this.
Right. So there are break rooms where
I'm sorry.
There are break rooms where there are not abilities to change.
Absolutely, yeah. There are several break rooms where you can't save. So it's like the authorial pacing is still there. They're still in control of what kind of experience that Alan and Saga would get within their chapters. It's just that it really depends on what the chapter is. And part two is like, I'm completely different from you guys, is that I am definitely more of a person who likes to create their own stories in games, you know, not so much to the level of Minecraft or Roblox or whatever like that, but like with Elden Ring or with Baldur's Gate or even with Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is why, like, the stories of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom being so lackluster doesn't bother me that much, because the stories I'm making on my own head, they're fucking fire, you know? So that's for me. What's going on, and that's what I really, really appreciate about Alan Wake 2, is that they are still thinking of me, the player, and how I might want to tell the story, or how I might want to tackle the story. That's why I appreciate about it so much.
Yeah. So I said that we would talk about this. I know that we have to dedicate a portion of this podcast to this specific moment, but let's get into it with Austin Clements, who says, "Hey, gentlemen, can we take a moment to talk about how awesome Chapter 4 of Alan's story was? Just the guts to put in a live action musical blew me away. Granted, the live action pieces did have a bit of a distracting blur. That was one of my favorite moments in gaming nonetheless. What do you guys think? Hope all is well and have a great and well-deserved holiday break." So yeah, I know what you're talking about with the blur. I think that's a consequence of playing the game on PlayStation 5 and maybe Series X too. I'm not sure. But yeah, I was really happy, guys. I did not have this spoiled for me in that I was seeing the tweets where people were saying, "Oh yeah, I'm that part was crazy. Make sure you get to this part or whatever." And then I think like 2 weeks ago, so maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the game came out, they just posted the music video online that kind of gave it away. But at that point, I think the people that would have cared the most would have gotten to it at that point. But yeah, Alan Wake straight up has a musical chapter in it that what I appreciated in particular was just that they could have just made it a roller coaster ride sequence or, where you're walking from A to B. And it kind of felt like that initially. And I thought, oh, this is cool, but they're kind of sacrificing the fact that it's a game and that you're walking around, but you're not doing anything. And then you start fighting during it. And it makes it 10 times cooler to me that they were like, oh yeah, you're going to fight guys during this part too. So I've said enough though. So Ben, what did you think about this? I know that you have, I don't know how much musical background you have. I know you have some ballroom dancing backgrounds, a little different, but
I used to be in bands and stuff.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. This is the chapter that you and I were kind of keeping track of each other, or at least I was keeping track of you where you were. And I texted you one night and I was like, have you played this chapter? And you were like, no. And I was like, shit, I can't talk about it yet then. Because you're usually my sounding board for knowing if you dislike something that I like, I usually know that you're wrong. So that's how that goes.
Fair enough.
But no, I thought this was awesome. And I played 2 different sequences, and I played almost every major release, many minor releases this year. And there were 2 times this year. As you know, I'm not much of a smiler, not because I am not happy, just because my face doesn't work right, apparently. But there were 2 sequences this year that just had me smiling the whole way through them in games. And this was one of them. And I couldn't believe that they put it in there. First of all, that it was in a game like Alan Wake, that it was in a Remedy game. Like Remedy does some crazy stuff, but I didn't expect this. And I certainly didn't expect for it to be, when you move on a little further, you're actually playing. And there's also live action mixed in with that. And so I thought like, okay, this is just going to be like a cutscene. And then it turns out you're playing the cutscene. And that's something that you don't see very often in games. And I think that's good because it makes these moments more special. I hope that people don't try to just emulate that for the sake of the social media cloud or whatever.
Oh my God, dude. Imagine the copycats.
Yeah.
We'll probably get a copy or 2, I think.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think we will. But I think that it's cool because it changes it up once again. And we're talking about the switching back and forth between perspectives and switching back and forth between Saga and Alan. And we're also switching back and forth between gameplay and cutscene and live action and game. And then you go and you're like, oh, by the way, here's another entirely different type of gameplay perspective experience that you didn't have at all before this. I don't know the full ramifications of what, in the universe of what that sequence being live action versus being in a cutscene, I guess you could say a video game cutscene in engine is. I haven't really parsed that together on if there's a meaning there that, okay, well, technically you're in the dark place, but this is in a different place. That I don't know. I haven't figured out. Maybe other people have more to shine on that, but I thought that it was just cool because it made me feel like I'm already in these 2 distinct worlds. And is this a third one? But either way, I just thought it was banging. It was a lot of fun. It had me smiling the entire time. And at one point I was just like trucking along, much like you, Dustin, where I was like, okay, I'm just walking through this cutscene. It's really cool and fun. And then all of a sudden I start getting attacked. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I thought, okay, I guess I'm fighting now. And that added like that extra piece to it as well. So when it ended, it has a couple endings and then, restarts up and you go a little further. And every time it ended, I was like, I hope it's not over. And then eventually it was over. And I thought the timing was good. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. The music was good, obviously, but I thought the experience itself was what made it really cool. Just I haven't played much like that. I don't know if I've ever played anything like that.
Did you know Alan says something different depending on how well you did during that whole battle sequence?
No.
Yes, his response to the whole sequence. This was before the whole sequence ends, so when he thinks it's ended, right? But after after you basically recreate Alan Wake 1, right? The Alan Wake 1 fights. If you get hit, he'll be like, "Well, that was unexpected."
Yeah.
But if you don't get hit at all and you do a perg run, he was like, "That was awesome."
Yeah. That's cool.
Gene,
That is cool.
let's stick with you. Remedy now, I wonder, have they set an expectation for these types of moments in games? Because a lot of people talk about the ashtray maze in Control being the moment, the holy shit, this is crazy, unlike anything I've played. And, we talked about copycats, so maybe, we'll see people try to riff on this as well. But I don't know. I feel like Remedy now has set the stage. They got to like one up themselves, maybe each release with some kind of crazy idea that shouldn't work, but does,
Well, in the interview with the FPS podcast, it was actually Gerard the Completionist's last on-camera appearance before the whole controversy regarding the charity. But in that interview, Sam Lake actually talked about how they were really pushing him to not have that whole part included because they couldn't figure it out. And he was like, "No, I need to have this musical in there, so let's figure it out." And then that's how they figure out having the little panels with the live action, and then like that you're able to walk through, which is incredible. That's an incredible way to solve a problem, solve an impossible problem, right? And that's how they ended up with being able to basically play through. In terms of what Remedy will do, I do think that there's an expectation. I expect Alan Wake 3 to end with Tor and Odin finally achieving their final forms, becoming the gods that they've always said that they were. And I imagine, I can just imagine in my head right now that Tor and Odin are now actually like spearing a Taken, and Tor finally has his fucking lightning hammer, going around fighting the Taken with Alan or Saga or whoever is the main character of Alan Wake 3 while one of their songs is playing, and it just becomes this massive surreal like godly moment. I feel like that's like really like where they need to take it to. I don't know how they're going to do it in terms of choreography, though, because the way everything was choreographed, the way the music was able to loop into itself, that must have been tough for the old gods of Asgard or / Poets of the Fall to write a song that's as catchy as it is, but also has so many different ways that it can loop and break that they were able to build a whole gameplay section around it. That's already fascinating when like Marty O'Donnell does that for the Halo series, when he was able to make all those amazing Halo songs, and like it just dynamically switches up depending on what Master Chief is doing. But imagine writing a fucking hair metal song and a rock opera song around that. That takes some real songwriting talent to be able to do that, and directional talent, which is why I hope he wins Best Director, because him and Kyle Rowley, because I think they both earn it because this was a hard beast to grapple with,
I can't imagine them not winning Best Direction. I mean, there's a number of things that I would also award Alan Wake 2 that I don't think it'll win in this context, but Best Direction I think is Alan Wake.
I don't think it's going to win Game of the Year.
No, I don't know.
And this is coming out on Thursday, right? So yeah, so yeah. I'm prepared for that to be a little disappointing, but I'm not going to be that disappointed because Baldur's Gate 3 is such a phenomenal achievement, and probably
award shows are just award shows. It doesn't take away your own experience.
Well, also
fantastic.
Also, these fucking we want to call the Game Awards the Oscars of games. Fine, the Oscars gets it wrong all the fucking time too. The Grammys get it wrong all the fucking time too. I knew that the Oscars got it wrong all the time when Pulp Fiction lost against Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, great movie, but we all know that Pulp Fiction is actually one of the most important movies of all time. But the Oscars got that completely wrong. Grammys. Beck lost against Celine Dion. So it doesn't matter.
Come on, the last season of Game of Thrones won an Emmy. You can put award shows where they belong, which is entertainment, but it doesn't inform how things actually are in the real world. Enjoy what you enjoy.
Exactly.
Alan Wake 2 is fantastic. It's probably not going to win Game of the Year. That's okay.
It's all that's a great way to put it. It's just entertainment. It's just for fun. It's just for funsies, and for pats on the back. But really, history will be the real awarder, I guess, of what'll happen.
Gene, you were talking about what you expect from the next game as far as new sequences and stuff like that, and I feel like with the way that Remedy is doing things, like somehow when I'm playing Alan Wake 3. Alan Wake is going to come into my office, like physically in person. I think they're going to like transcend the scopes of video games and entertainment as we know it. So look forward to that too.
Speaking of that, I was positive that one of those anonymous phone calls was going to be from Sam Lake as the writer of the game, Alan Wake.
Dude, I thought that was going to happen too.
Yeah.
Because of we're talking about the Alex Casey meta in the game of like, Alex Casey's a real guy, but he's also Alan Wake's, the character he created. But there's also the actor that plays Alex Casey is in the Dark World also. Then I was like, dude, are they going to have a thing where Sam Lake is also somehow as the creator of the game or the creator of Alan Wake going to get involved to some degree, which I think there's maybe a way they could do that and it'd be cool, but I think that might have been like a bridge too far for some people.
Oh, I think
they might be saving that maybe for the last one where Sam Lake.
I think Sam Lake's going to make an appearance in Alan Wake 3, and I think there's going to be photography in Alan Wake 3. Would be my bet. But yeah, to speak about We Sing for just a second.
Please.
One thing I want to say is. I agree. It's a fantastic experience. I think I described it as a Disney World pre-show. I really think it has that vibe of being in a studio and having these videos go on. And my favorite bit of that experience is the videos they have of them pointing out ladders and telling you where to go. So you can see it in the music video on YouTube if you haven't played it, although I don't know why you're still listening if you haven't. But you can see the pieces where they have like one of the Poets of the Fall or Alan or Mr. Door pointing or saying down here. And when you see it in game, it's exactly like being in a theme park kind of queue line of how to get through an area. And I love that part. I will say, as a person that loves the music throughout the game, I think actually Herald of Darkness is probably my least favorite Poets of the Fall song in the game. I think certainly Show Me the Champion of Light, the chorus is super strong, but I don't actually think that the verses where they're doing the storyline of Alan's past and the Bright Falls Alan Wake 1 experience, I don't think those are really that strong.
They're not that the chorus is incredible, but yeah, you're right. The verses aren't my favorite parts. So the chorus I can't get out of my goddamn head.
No, Show Me the Champion of Light.
It's only been replaced recently by Tom Petty's Long Road, thanks to the GTA 6 trailer, which I can't get that shit out of my fucking head.
I get you.
So obsessed with GTA 6 right now.
Yeah, no, and Show Me the Champion of Light is fantastic, and I think they do a great job of that chorus. And I think actually it's one of the places where I think that there is that kind of disorientation that I talked about, which is that they hide the plot in plain sight, right? The chorus of that song is Show Me the Champion of Light and I'll show you the Herald of Darkness. Alan is Scratch. Scratch is Alan. Like that's the chorus that you got stuck in your head in the middle of the game. They already told you that twist. And they do that throughout the game with a lot of the twists. And I think that's super smart. But I love the experience. I think in the places where Alan Wake 2 runs potentially a little on the indulgent side, it probably is We Sing because it doesn't connect directly to your experience as Alan in the Dark Place. It's kind of a card on the writer's room board that says, now there's a musical. And then you go through the rest of the level, which is the next level, I guess. But even that being the case, I'm so happy it exists and that we got to do it. I'm just not going to be complaining about it. But if I'm being more kind of particular or nitpicky about these things, it does kind of just sit outside the game and you do this thing and then you go back to playing the game.
Yeah.
I honestly thought when it happened, I was thinking, well, this was before they talked about how, it has to stick to the genre. But I thought, it's clear that he's able to write it as a musical and the musical happens. And I thought, there's going to be a part of this game where it's a weird sitcom or something that Alan Wake is in that gets progressively more strange and eerie until it becomes horror in a sitcom or any genre for that matter. I was wondering are we going to get the gauntlet here? But I think
just like the David Lynch Bunny Rabbit sitcoms. Have you guys ever seen that one?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
I was thinking WandaVision, but yeah.
He did a whole series of sitcoms of these three bunny rabbits that barely say anything and they barely do anything, but then there's a laugh track, and it's look it up. It's so fucking creepy. But I was expecting something like that too, for sure.
Yeah,
because the David Lynch influence is so strong, obviously, right?
but I will say, yeah, I think I'm right on board with you, Rick. Where I love this chapter. I think it is cool and hilarious, and it fits most of the way enough that I'm cool with it, right? And then I would say I like it and even love it, but at the same time, it does feel. I can understand why they're like, you can't put the musical in. It doesn't really make sense, because I kind of agree that when I really try to think about what I do know about the story, I'm not sure that it really makes sense that it's in there, other than, like you said, the board where they write, or maybe that was Gene that said that, but like, yeah, it says that on the board. It became a musical or whatever. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, every time in Alan's world, I would go back to the writer's room and see, like, what does he think is happening here? Because, right, like, the conceit is that Alan Wake, the character, is never leaving the writer's room. He is just imagining the adventures he's having in the dark place. And that's why you can change the world around you. And that's all really cool from a gameplay perspective. But as you progress through each of the chapters, the blackboard gets these little note cards about what you just did. And so right after the musical, the very first thing I did was go, okay, what was that? And it's like an index card that says there's a musical. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Sam wanted a musical. So
yeah,
we got one. Good.
I got a little confused, and maybe you guys can help clarify. There was I always thought that Alan could write things, and we keep talking about that, write things into the world. But it seemed like at one point Tom said basically you can't write things in the world, you can manipulate them. I don't remember the exact wording there.
I talked about this a little bit on the Spoilercast for the remaster. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the trick is that the power of the dark place is that of creation, artistic creation. And from the writer's perspective, at least how they've articulated it in a number of ways. And remember, there is a cut scene where Warland Dora essentially says, you're making it too complicated, Alan.
Right. Yeah.
You can do more.
Yeah.
So there are probably more oceans to explore in the Alan Wake universe. But as we understand it right now, you can take what exists and you can coax it into a story. And from Alan Wake 1 and American Nightmare, we know that if you're not good at that, if you're not keeping track of where the plot holes are and making sure everything's filled in the way you want it, that the dark presence can edit it, can change it how it sees things, and make sure that it still works within a story. So Alan is bound by making it a cohesive story where there is verisimilitude, or however you want to frame it, within the characters and how they act and why they act that way, even in a supernatural environment like this. And so some of the stuff we get in this game is at least an ostensible answer to the Tom Zane question, which is that Alan can't create Tom Zane exactly, but also Tom Zane isn't a poet anymore. He's a movie creator, and Alan Wake might have been created by Tom Zane as part of Endless or Nightless Night. I mean, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle of there where, okay, if Tom Zane is an artist and he's a movie maker and this movie exists and it has all of these references to the game we're playing right now, which is ostensibly a third book written by an artist that landed in the Cauldron Lake as well, where does that put us as between Tom Zane and Alan Wake? And I can't tell you the answer to that. I can tell you it's really interesting to think about. Yeah. And I can tell you my favorite part, just like Alan Wake 1, is that unlike Lost, which I referenced earlier, where you do feel like sometimes the mystery box is empty and it's just being filled in as they go with what they think is the most exciting or dramatic, Alan Wake 2, Alan Wake 1 feels like, okay, I maybe can't get to the center of the Tootsie Roll Pop. I can't get to the middle of the spiral myself, but there is one. And when we run up against new rules or new notions or new facets of what we're dealing with, they're coming from a place that feels like the authors know what they're doing, that they are describing an actual chain of events, and there is a there, which when you lose that, none of this makes sense. None of this works, right? As a mystery, when you lose the notion that they have any idea what's going on, that's when things fall apart. And I've never felt that with Remedy. My complaints about Control are not with the overall world building. It was that the plot wasn't as dynamic or dramatic or interesting enough compared to the Alan Wake plots. But I think Remedy is at the top of their game. And I think the first message you asked, Dustin, was, can Sam Lake be Hideo Kojima? And I think I always hate to compare, especially creative minds like that. He's not going to be Hideo Kojima, but he's in that ballpark to me. He's in the he's in the stratosphere with the real auteurs of industry, whether that's gaming or movies or books or television or anything else, where I want to see what he thinks about. I want to see what he thinks up next. And I'll be right there playing it because I think he's one of the best we've got. And that doesn't mean I'm going to love every decision he ever makes, but I think he's trying things. He's not fallen into categories that are predefined for him. And like Hideo Kojima, those are different experiences that we haven't had before.
Yeah. That's the thing that I've been thinking about is that, and I guess I don't even know the answer because I was thinking about, is he on Kojima level? And I thought, well, certainly not in the mainstream eyes. And we even had a write-in about this. We can talk about this if we want right now, but I don't know if Alan Wake 2 was necessarily all that successful of a game commercially, because there was like the talk about it not charting in the digital charts or something, and then I'm trying to remember whether it wasn't even counted because it was digital, but there's definitely some haziness about whether the game was that commercially successful. But the counter argument to what I'm already even saying is that arguably Death Stranding wasn't even that commercially successful either. But amongst...
And I would bet that Alan Wake was made cheaper than Death Stranding as well.
Certainly.
Way cheaper.
Certainly. Yeah.
Those are two games I love, so
yeah.
I'll vouch for both of them.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think there's an element too where it's amongst the hardcore, us, the people listening to this podcast, then absolutely. I think that Sam Lake belongs in that category. And yeah, I think that something I said on Sacred was that every Remedy game has branched out and tried to do this multimedia thing more and more. We saw them try really hard with Quantum Break to incorporate live action elements, and in my opinion, just made it feel really lopsided, where you would play a game for a bit and then watch a show for a bit and then play a game. Didn't quite hit for me in that way. And then with Control, start to just blend things in together, where now Alan Wake is really, really hitting its stride, where I feel like they have it figured out, where it's like, hey, we can do live action TV type elements and still make it fully a game. And that's what I think.
They said this was their first game where they actually had this was their first game where they actually had a live action crew, like an experience like live action crew, as opposed to like their other games where they had a director and a scripter, but not like an actual studio and an effort behind it.
Right.
What's funny is they use some of their lessons directly from Control, right? Yeah. Certainly the bits where you only get a little bit of the video or the manuscript page or whatever, and the most important things to keep you going forward in the game. But then for those that want to dive in, you can go and get more information. Like I didn't even notice that they were doing that for a couple of manuscript pages, where Alan Wake will voice over and he'll have a video and you'll hear a typewriter and he'll talk to you about some of the important lines. And then the manuscript pages in the menu separately, much like the videos in Control, where you just get a beat from Nathaniel Trench, who has a very similar voice to Alex Casey. Yeah. And you pop in and then you get the full long video of whatever they're talking about in the Control landscape. I think that's a really smart way to do it, right? Which is, we want you to have this information. We want to have these little video bits, but we know that some of you want to shoot Taken. Some of you want to go through the forest and be more directed in your gameplay approach. And some of you want to dive in and look at this like it's a research paper. And we're going to give you the option to do both. And I just think that's so smart of a game design. And so many game developers don't do that, right? You either have to read through the 6 paragraphs to get a notion of the world building because we're never going to tell you about it, or you have to just go zipping through and hope that we know what we're talking about behind the scenes.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Control, one of my biggest complaints was just that was also maximal, but just purely in terms of information in specifically reading in the documents that you got, where there's still a lot of that in Alan Wake, but it's still very important a lot of times, but it doesn't feel like if I don't read all of them, I'm not going to be able to grasp what's happening. Speaking of that, I think this is a good time to bring in, we've talked about this here and there quite a bit, is the mind place and the writer's room, which I think is one of the most unique aspects of this game. So Wiley Olmsted, that's it, wrote in and said, "Hey, Sacred Scratches, what did you think of the mind place and the writer's room? Did you enjoy the mechanic of dragging pictures to the right spot or
Sounds
profiling?" Yeah. With Saga, personally, while I thought that the presentation was excellent, it became tedious, sometimes very, and would be attaching pictures to parts of the board, like throwing shit at the wall. It did feel good when you were on a roll with it, though. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks. Yeah. You got thoughts? Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I have thoughts on everything. I apologize for that.
No, please.
I think that it is one of my favorite things in the game, both the Mind Place and the Writer's Room, but I did hope it would be a little bit less mechanical than it wound up being, right? It really is put the photo of this thing in the Post-it note where it's appropriate, and then we'll get forward with the plot, and it becomes necessary to advancement in parts of Saga's case. But I think ultimately it makes you feel like you are, again, a detective in some important way while you're going through these things on this impossible mystery. And that's important to what Remedy is doing here, which is putting you in these people's shoes, disoriented for Alan, but also being a detective from Saga's perspective. And then I think the Mind Place in particular has one of my favorite uses in the game. I said one of my favorite moments already, which is the end of chapter 2. One of my favorite moments towards the end of the game is what I call the anxiety Mind Place, which is they use essentially the tooltips and the functionality of the interface when Saga is in the dark place to show you what that looks like, because you're in Saga's brain and it's the interface itself is yelling at you and saying you're dumb and things like that. And it's such a smart way to show what the dark place does to people when you've seen it on the outside from Alan, but you get it from the inside through the use of the Mind Place at the end. And they do so many things like that throughout the game that even if I don't love how that mechanic turned out, I don't think it's perfect or anything like that, it's so useful for what they want to show at the end of the game that I wouldn't do anything to change it, honestly.
I know that you mentioned about it getting a little mechanical. The one part that I had to laugh in particular was when after the the nursing home section where he's like, oh, you can't, we got to talk in here. Right. Then you have to go through this cutscene and you constantly have to go and click Post-it notes. Like, you could have just played through the cutscene there. I really felt like there was no benefit through me clicking on each subject matter that we talked about. But Ben, I know you and I talked about this too at some point where you were pretty obsessive with the board, finding everything. Is that required for the platinum to get?
I don't know because I just did it.
Okay.
I actually didn't have any cleanup at the end because I was so obsessive with everything in the game and exploring every part of the game that I got to the end and literally the end of the game happened and the platinum popped at the same time. And that was really cool because you don't get that very often. No. I was I probably spent the PlayStation 5 clock is messed up. I assume my save will say the right date, but I already deleted the game until the DLC comes out, so I don't know. But or the right amount of hours. But anyway, I spent a long time because I was just exploring every inch of the map, running out of ammo constantly because I was exploring every inch and having to fight people. But anyway, yeah, I really liked the Mind Place. I liked it a lot more than the Writer's Room. I felt like the Writer's Room was much more shallow as far as the actual amount of time you needed to spend in there to really get everything there was from it. And maybe that's a good thing for some and maybe it's a bad thing for others. But I think that I agree with almost everything Rick said there. Actually, I think I agree with everything Rick said there. The thing I would say is that I saw a lot of people after I finished the game talking about how, very similar to this question of, and I think even Colin mentioned that the Writer's Room the Mind Place got tedious and I just started clicking things and I feel like so much of you don't get super duper deep in the Mind Place, but a lot of the plot points are cleared up and you can see things coming. I mean, the game isn't exactly a mystery entirely. Like we know you at least assume some of the end plot points towards the beginning of the game. But I think that the Mind Place really clears up a lot of that stuff if you spend your time and you're actually trying to place tiles where they go and see it unravel. And there was one time where I didn't go into the Mind Place and I finished a chapter. And when I went in, it just automatically put everything up. She's like, no need to go through all that again or something like that.
I was going to ask if that happened to you because, if you zip past a puzzle and it's like, here were all the clues we were going to give you.
Yeah. I was so disappointed that I didn't get to actually place the things and figure out the puzzle in the Mind Place because I really like that mechanic. And I think that people who did not fully indulge in that were probably more confused at certain points than others, if I have to guess by reading some of the feedback I've seen out there. And so I think that was a really, I don't know, because you can still get most of that information. Like you said, there's certain things you have to do to progress the plot, but because you can get most of that information after the fact, after you've already done the gameplay, I think that not actually parsing through it is a detriment to the story, is a detriment to the gameplay. I think that
Yeah, you're meant to bounce in and put those things on the board. I actually think they maybe should put one of those yellow dots on the main screen.
Yeah.
And they decided that was too annoying to people.
It seems like tedium, but I think it's really important. What I will say about the Mind Place, I'm sorry, Rick, I'll let you go.
Oh, no, not at all.
But the Mind Place, so people are talking about technical issues with this game. I had a little bit of the flare up with the lighting when I first started playing the game, but it went away after the first patch that they put out, literally the same night I started playing the game. And I on one of the boss battles, when you're trying to get Scratch into the cage, one of the light fixtures that you have to move just did not appear. And I was like, I did that for half an hour running around, couldn't figure it out. Just hit back the checkpoint, got back in. Those are the only two big things I have. I have very few of the same technical issues that a lot of people have. But the Mind Place was just full of bugs for me, I will say. Like there was one instance where I spent a long time looking at a clue and placing it, and I could not figure it out. And I was like, maybe I just haven't progressed far enough. I progressed to the next chapter, went back, tried to place that clue, didn't work. So then I did just do the thing where I'm just clicking everything and it didn't go. Eventually, it went somewhere I had clicked before, 100% had clicked before, and it went there and it was fine. Also, the yellow dots in the Mind Place didn't always line up for me. Like I'd go there and there'd be nothing new.
There's nothing there. Yeah.
That was one thing that I did have.
That's still happening to me.
Is it?
Yeah. And the problem with a game like this, right, disorienting, trying to do these things, is that you never quite know when the game is playing with you.
Right.
So you do have those problems with bugs. I had an issue in Coffee World where the ride wouldn't spin.
Oh no!
And
Dustin had the same problem.
Oh, that happened to me.
I couldn't decide whether that was on me or not, and then you go online and you're like, nope, that's not on me. But
I got soft locked in Mind Place, and I was like, oh, am I just here now? I'm just like smiling happily, like, oh, I'm just here now.
Where we live?
Like 20 minutes later, I was like, I think I should be leaving. I should be continuing the game. I think I'm fucking soft locked. Fuck.
And you're playing a game like Alan Wake. It's like, I don't want to accidentally stumble on plot points.
Right.
So when do I ask for help? And so that is a problem for my experience. And it is the nature of the beast. It's a giant game, but it did happen to me. But I really like the Mind Place. And I think even what you were mentioning with respect to the conversations with the Odinsons, again, is another aspect of the game saying, all right, we've given you this interface. Now let's mess with it.
Yeah.
Right. So when he shows up the first time, you're like, what in the heck? And then he talks about the site and all these various things. And you get that conversation, and that's great. And then you start thinking about, well, did Alan write that power? And it's like, no, he can't change powers exactly. But, and then it's all this stuff that all loops in on an understanding of the game that I think really works very well. And they use the interface to that effect. I also agree. I think it was Ben that said that the writer's room was a little shallow. I think that mechanic is super cool, but winds up being trial and error for the most part. Like, I don't know whether you want me to put serial killing cult in the ballroom or not. It's just what moves me forward, and it's kind of figuring out how I can get the closest to the center of the room or whatever it is I'm trying to do.
That's probably where I wasted the most time, is trial and error in the writer's room, for sure.
Yeah, and I wish it were a little bit stronger, and even kind of the connection point of, okay, Alan is seeing parts of Alex Casey and then he's being inspired by these things and what that means in the plot. Because what I think it ultimately winds up meaning is that Alan Wake is essentially psychic, not entirely dissimilar from Saga. And the reason Alex Casey is a real person is because Alan Wake's always been writing about Alex Casey, and to some extent. And so him seeing the New York cult murders from the Dark Place isn't so different than what he was doing before. But you have to piece all that together from a bunch of different things. And I don't know that's the cleanest in the story. And I would love to see it a little bit cleaner. But I think it's a great story with a bunch of twists. And I actually wanted to talk about those a little bit with you all. Dustin, I don't want to take over on this, but...
No, just the only thing, Gene, I know you had an out time. I should have asked you earlier. I want to make sure we get to the stuff we need to.
No, I still got 2 more hours, so...
Oh, shit. I don't know if we're going to go that long. But okay, I just want to make sure. I couldn't remember what you said. So, yeah, Hoeg, wherever you want to go for it, man.
Oh, well, so I really love the twist in this game. We talked about the fact that you can get them in a different order based on whether you play Saga or Alan. So I wanted to talk about some of my favorite in the game, and I wanted to get your views on whether you felt they were twists when you experienced them and whether or not you liked them as part of this conversation. So the first one, earliest in the game, might be my favorite, which is that Alan is the one editing the manuscript pages. And this goes again to interface, which is that unlike Alan Wake 1, you get to see the edits that are happening in the manuscript in the image that they give you of these different pages. So when you click on a manuscript page, Alan will read what the final version of the manuscript is, and then you can see a picture of what's been crossed out and what's been added. And originally, especially after you talk to Alan, I think at the top of chapter 3, and he mentions that the name's been scratched off, every hint is given to you that the editor is Mr. Scratch, which is what you would expect, because in Alan Wake 1, Barbara Jagger, the Dark Presence, is the editor and making things worse. So you can now go into these manuscript pages, as I did while I was playing through the early parts of the game, and say, all right, how does this make things worse? What is the Dark Presence trying to accomplish with this edit, which is a fun game to play. And then a little bit further on in the game, you get the notion that Mr. Scratch wrote the original manuscript and Alan is trying to fix things with his edits, and you can read it that way opposite. And then at the end of the game, of course, it's kind of both, and you can figure out what's happening there. But did you like that twist? Did you see it as a twist? And did you wind up doing what the Hoegs did and going through all the manuscript pages to try to figure out what was happening in the edits?
I personally went through every manuscript page as I received them and like watched the full thing and listened to the full read and then even read the page as well. That particular thing was not a twist for me. It must have been the order I did it in. But I kind of, or maybe I saw it. I don't know if I saw it coming or what, but
You could just be in front of them. I mean, that's totally okay.
yeah, I think that's what it was. I just played it in the right order yeah. So for me, no, I like that. The idea of it being a twist, that the idea of that flipping over what it is that the narrative is telling you is the narrative, but it's really not. But it wasn't a surprise to me, if that makes sense.
Gene, what are your thoughts?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Oh, just was it a twist for you when you found out that Alan, or at least ostensibly Alan, the good persona, was the one making the edits on the manuscript pages that you saw?
Yeah, a little bit. I was like, oh, or I assumed that Wake and Scratch were two different people. It's been years since I played American Nightmare, so I feel like I think we now interpret American Nightmare as one of his attempts to write himself out, and it was kind of a breakthrough for him in terms of him, I guess, recognizing Scratch in himself. But yeah, I guess so. It was a little bit of a twist. I wasn't super surprised though, especially when Alan started becoming. I think more shocking was just seeing Alan as a Taken. I thought that was fucking cool because he looked really, really cool as a bad guy. So that was really my biggest takeaway. Like, he was in his flannel and like the darkness was emanating from him. And I'm like,
well, when he takes out Yako, it's like, oh, all right.
Yeah,
serious business now.
Or Yako, yeah. You really feel for Ilmo and everything.
You do.
I was just really, really like astounded by how cool and intimidating he looked. And then when the Dark Place got Casey, I was like, no, man, like, like Casey's been through enough, he's had a lifelong suffering of being the joke of all these books, and then that now he's just in it, But one of my favorite parts, what came early, was when Casey told Alan, are we just fucking characters in your fucking stories? I was like, oh god, I love that energy. He's so fucking, like, it's just finally coming out. He's been wanting to say this for a long time, And then eventually Saga saying the same thing too. He's like, we're not just fucking characters in your fucking story, which is why I feel like Alan Wake is kind of like a story about the accountability of artists. It kind of it's kind of a wrinkle in the conversation of whether we can separate the art from the artist, because the artist does put a little bit of themselves into a lot of art. So how much of that and how much harm can that art be doing to other people or to the people that they're writing about or whatever, So I feel like Alan Wake does kind of flirt with those discussions too.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's about writing and the creative process in a way that we rarely get to see, which is often indulgent in Alan Wake 1 and in Alan Wake 2, but also
and it's very indulgent in Alan Wake's case. He is one of my favorite things about Alan Wake is that he is called the bad boy of fiction, which I love, and
he punches out people in nightclubs.
He punches out paparazzi like his Sean Penn. He goes out to the New York's hottest nightclubs according to Rose. I love Rose too.
Yeah.
Rose was one of my favorite characters.
Distractingly good facial animations.
Oh my
on
god,
Rose.
Rose's first appearance at the diner was amazing because her facial animation, dude, was so crazy. It reminded me of Silent Hill. That really odd looking facial animation where it's so exaggerated. It's like LA Noir, but LA Noir if it's meant to be creepy. Like imagine if you actually met someone who talked like someone in LA Noir, you know, like they're talking like this and they're accentuating every part of their lips and their mouth and their eyes to say every single word. And it's
Gene's
like
creeping me out.
yeah, if you meet someone like that, it's kind of creepy. So like it was really cool to see Rose lean into that, and I think that's what Silent Hill really understood. I don't think that the animations in Silent Hill were bad because they were just bad. I mean, they could have been, but if they did, they really leaned into how creepy that could look. You know,
I thought that was intentional, personally.
I thought it was intentional.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like, Hoeg, as far as your question about some of the reveals, I don't know. I guess I'll have to just be honest and at the risk of sounding dumb. I kind of just felt like I was along for the ride with some of these things where I don't want to make it sound like I didn't understand anything in the story, but I was like, okay.
This is hard to understand. Don't worry about it, Case.
I was like, okay, he's Mr. Scratch. He's editing the story. Alan's writing the story. But now when the reveal finally happened, it's like, oh, well, Alan Wake and Scratch are kind of the same person and kind of not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that it wasn't surprising. It's just so much crazy shit was going on. I was like, all right. Like that sounds about right. I mean,
and they're playing with you, right? Because you're playing Alan Wake in the Dark Place, and they have a zoom in to the Dark Place puddle, but they don't actually give you an acknowledgement of the fact that there's an Alan Wake sitting in the lodge, and there's an Alan Wake that you're playing. So what are you supposed to think? So I think everybody's first thought is, well, that's Scratch. That dude that is talking to Alex Casey is Scratch. Look out for that. And then of course there's a Scratch attack, and the FBC rolls in, and you're like, yep, okay. This all checks out, except nope, Alan actually escaped and is still Scratch. It's like, well, is he? I was joking with my daughter halfway through the game. Is like, if they're really on their game, they're going to convince me to kill Alan Wake as Saga Anderson, and that it's a good idea at the end of the game. And they didn't quite do that, but it was in that neighborhood. And one of my favorite beats, one of my favorite beats replaying the game is that if the first scene of the game is Alan Wake with the light bullet in his head. And you don't pay mind to it when you start the game. But the next twist that I really liked was that the cult is killing Taken.
Yeah.
And is the good guys.
That was cool. That was cool to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like that one. And again, I really like.
I didn't want Ilmo to be a bad guy. I was like, oh man, they're fucking it up for me. And then when you finally go into the Kavala Knights barn or whatever, and you realize like, wait a minute, it's so fucking bright in here. Why would the cult have all these lights in here? That was my first clue. I was like, wait a minute, I think the cult are good guys.
And those clues are I love those. I love those because I think that they really do hide most of the plot in plain sight. I think if you start the game over, you see the description of what's happening to Nightingale is that the Dark Presence took him into the lake and he became a Taken, and then he came out of the lake as a Taken. And that doesn't fit with any of the things that you're thinking at that point in the game, because Alex Casey has put in your head that this is a ritual to create Taken. Mm-hmm. And you kind of roll with that for a while because that's the hypothesis. But like the game is very upfront with no, Nightingale is a Taken, and they're trying to kill him. And then once it comes out that, well, they're kind of policing the lake to keep people safe. It's like, that makes total sense for what we know, but it wasn't the thought process that we were working on for most of the game. And I think the game does a great job of that.
Yeah,
dude. And the fact that the Cult of the Trees logo is the upside down version of the FBC's logo, it's just fucking awesome.
I didn't catch that.
Oh yeah, the FBC's logo is is the upside down triangle, right?
Yeah,
which is the pyramid that they confer with in the astral plane. Yeah. And then they caught that, and they're like, hey, wait, what if we just turn it upside down? And it's the Cult of the Tree. They look like trees. It's really cool.
And it's the Cult of the Word in the Dark Place, and they separate them out and make essentially a W, which also is for Wake. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of fun too. So I mean, I think they have a lot of fun with symbolism, and things of that nature. But I love
Also,
that they were the good
Alan,
guys.
Alan apparently means lake in Finnish, so his Finnish name is Lake Wake.
Well, let's talk about metaphors for just a second, because I think one of the things that the music really shows off, which is all custom music for this game. I loved it in Alan Wake 1 when they used Orbison and they used Poe and they used all these various things to set the tone for the end of chapters, but it raises up a whole nother level when they have songs that are written just for the game, like we talked about with Follow You Into the Dark. But one of the things I thought was really smart from a kind of poetry standpoint is that they have so many metaphors of water and light and darkness that you realize that you can say just about anything in song or poetry form and interpret 7 million things on it. So you can listen to all these songs about water and drowning and light and darkness and get 800 different perspectives as the game goes on from those songs. So I think they do a really good job of using metaphors in a way that is both kind of deep and interesting, and then also at the end of the day, more summer blockbuster than English literature class. And that's a hard thing to pull off, I think. I also wanted to ask about Alice. I've mentioned.
I was just about to bring up Alice. That's something I wanted to bring up. Is that? Well, go ahead. I'll say my thoughts after you pitch it.
Oh yeah. So the big twist at the end of the game, at least as presented, which is that they give you the information in the mid-credits cutscene, is that Alice dove in after Alan into Cauldron Lake, which is both a mirror of what Alan did for her in Alan Wake 1, and at least ostensibly unexpected for what Alan thinks has happened, which is that she committed suicide when she couldn't take visions of Scratch anymore. And I don't think we get a lot of clarity around what exactly she was experiencing vis-a-vis Mr. Scratch, because Alan Wake was still in the dark place at the time, but we don't know exactly what was happening to her, except that she was unhappy about it. And then she commits suicide. I guess my question is, one, did you know in advance that Alice was alive? Did you think it was a good twist at the end? Do you think it's a good mid-cutscene capper? Mid-credits capper. I can speak. I do it for a living.
I personally didn't see it coming. Yeah, sorry, Dustin.
Oh, good.
You wanted to talk about it first. I definitely didn't see it coming. I thought it was good. Like you said, I assume she'll take much more of a role in Alan Wake 3, for sure. I thought that the ambiguity was a little bit frustrating, where Alan's been gone for 13 years, presumably. And granted, this didn't happen right at the end of that 13 years. It happened sometime previous to that because it's recordings and everything. But I definitely was like, well, what's she been doing this whole time that she just finally decided to jump in? Like, it seemed a little bit off to me. It made much more sense to me from a human perspective that it's been this long and she's can't take it anymore, and she decided to end it. But seeing that she was actually going to rescue him, I was like, oh, okay, this kind of paints that portion of the story in a whole new light. But whereas Alan Wake 1 was way more, talked about Alice way more, it included more of Alice. Alan Wake 2, really, you don't get a lot of Alice till the last act of the game. And other than the fact that Alan's trying to save her, I thought that it was, I appreciated that twist, but I don't think it was as impactful because there was so little of her story or their story together up until that point. So I thought it was a good twist, but it wasn't as meaningful as I think it could have been had there been more lead up to it, or
this might just be the natural romantic in me, but like that beat of I'm going to throw myself back into the place that I already know is the dark place to go save him is tremendously powerful as I think about it right now and as I experience it in the moment. Right. Now, I will tell you, my daughter, who had played Alan Wake 1 with me and was sitting next to me, was visibly upset about the suicide video and was bugging me about whether or not this game was going to have any kind of decent ending. And she'd already said, because there's posters all around the dark place and various messages to you about there are no happy endings, right? That's one of the Casey movie taglines. And I said, there is no way that Alice is dead, so don't worry about it. And I don't know whether that's just kind of the narrative beats structure in my head, that it didn't make any sense for Alice to die there, or also that the actual montage of photos that show her committing suicide look very much like the edge of Cauldron Lake. Yeah. And I had already had a number of theories while we had played through about Saga and Logan and drowning in Cauldron Lake and various aspects of what would happen to you if you found yourself in Cauldron Lake. And I thought, okay, this makes sense to what we already know at this point in time, which is that Alan's been collecting photos We've been talked to about the fact that all art is manifested by Cauldron Lake, and so Alice and photography would make sense. And I think that the light bullet works pretty well with the notion that Alice is trying to save Alan. I actually think that the light bullet wasn't set up as well as I would have liked in the game, because I think it's mostly trying to keep the Alice twist secret. And also, I like to give it credit for being a reference to video gaming in general. I think of the light bullet as a reference to Ocarina of Time. I'll just spoil all the things for everybody from the late 90s. Which, of course, ends with a light arrow being given to you by Zelda to defeat Ganon. And as soon as they give you that picture of the light bullet, I'm like, well, that's going to manifest. And you use the shoebox, and that all makes sense. And I thought, okay, we're gonna end the Dark Presence with a light bullet. Obviously, it doesn't go that direction, but I thought that was a nice homage to that. And I think there are a bunch of homages and twists on the fact that you've played video games, if not even Remedy games before, done by these folks. And one thing I wanted to add to that was the notion of American Nightmare, right? So last time I was on talking with you all about Alan Wake, I had told Colin that I didn't think it was necessary to play American Nightmare because it ultimately ends with Alan not out of the dark place. And I still think that for playing Alan Wake 2, but I do think they play with you, especially with the Scratch plot line and the happy song and things like that, about what's happening there with the notions in American Nightmare that are presented that Alan Wake is looping. Right. So they're messing with you on the loop stuff. And certainly the last line of both the game and Nightless Night is it's not a loop, it's a spiral, which, while technically a reveal and much like it's not a lake, it's an ocean, follows the Alan Wake kind of structure, isn't actually a reveal insofar as the game you've been playing is obviously not a loop. You're not just replaying the same thing over and over again, even if it feels like it's looping. And they put things in like the death screen that says, you know, we're re-looping and whatnot. I can't remember what that message is exactly, but it's caught in a loop, I think. And you get to the end and it's like, yeah, of course it's a spiral, but neither Tom Zane got killed by a bullet to the head and neither did Alan Wake. So there's a lot to kind of figure out there that we can't know because we don't have our Return of the Jedi yet. But I think at the end of the day, that all of that is hidden right where you can see it. I joked with my daughter about the fact that it's obviously not a loop. Even though I think, again, when we talk about art, we talk about poetry, the fact that they have that Poe song essentially be the same song over and over and over again for the end of every Alan chapter is a brilliance of its own and a lot of fun there. And it's not the same song. There's like 3 versions of it, but it's really, really well done.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to say about Alice, just that I replayed Alan Wake 1 when the remaster came out, but I've already feel like it's not super fresh. But my takeaway always on her was that I never really cared for her as a character that much. And I also thought that the way her, Xbox 360 graphics, she looked kind of weird. So maybe that was adding to the off-putting nature of my feelings on Alice. But
she looks so awful in the old model. I actually played the original Steam release too, and it's like, oh, these models. Alan looks fucking horrible. He looks like a blow-up sex doll,
Yeah.
Like that,
right. Well, and the thing that I really appreciated was just that even while it wasn't necessarily a lot of it, hearing her post Alan Wake 1 after getting out of the dark place and not remembering and having to not only deal with the loss of her celebrity husband where all eyes are on her, but also dealing with this crazy shit going on where some weird thing is going on where she's being haunted by him. And it's funny too, because I remember one of the big key elements about her is that she's not necessarily a very successful photographer. Mm-hmm. And she kind of rides Alan's success to some degree in that, it's Alan Wake's wife. So, that's kind of special if you were to work with her. Right. And then the photo shoots that she would do were for Alan and the covers of his books. So all of her work was around like Alan, Right. Yeah. And then after he's dead, quote unquote dead, that's still the case. And not only does he haunt her in that this is like her most successful thing, but it's about him still. Still, her most successful thing is still about him. And at the meantime, it's about him haunting her. So I wonder if there's kind of an interesting analogy going on there as well. But I felt like with her committing suicide that it felt, this is a very dark game, obviously, but something about that sequence felt too dark to me in some ways, where I thought, I don't know if they're going to actually commit to that, especially the way they show it to you. It felt, it would have been really bold if they stuck to it, and I would have really respected it. But something about it felt like, I don't know if they're going to do that.
I think it's obliterative to everything that the player has sought to achieve, right? Alan Wake 1 is all about saving her. You save her by sacrificing yourself into the dark place. Alan's been there for 13 years. I'm sure you could tell a bleak story about that where Alice dies. I think even the portions that you just start with, where it's like she's clearly sad and depressed from whatever time frame you're getting that information, is already kind of a downer on Alan Wake 1, which is like, you saved your wife and she never got over it. Right. That's not a great feeling from that. But if she commits suicide at the end, I don't think there's recovering for any kind of heroic journey through Alan Wake 1 and Alan Wake 2 for Alan. I guess that's one of the reasons why I was sure she wasn't dead.
Yeah, it's I gotta say, I love that sequence though. That is like the very slow moving where she dives off.
Yeah.
I was like, they're gonna jump scare when this happened, because it's so quiet, but it's just so immediately just disturbing in that, I don't know, it kind of reminded me, it gave me the same feeling of like, I don't know, when you're a teenager and someone's like, hey, look at this photo where someone hung themselves in this forest, and you're like, oh shit, I should not be seeing this. But you see shit like that on the internet, right? But I got that feeling. I was like, holy shit, we're seeing this moment of someone ending their life, which later we find out not to be true, but it made me feel that same kind of thing where it's like, oh, I don't even know if I want to see this, right? Where she jumps off. But yeah, that was I like seeing more of her, and I like the way they did it, and I'm very curious about how she's incorporated into the next game, and how it'll make sense in that Alan sacrifices himself to save her. And now she's sacrificing herself to save him, which again comes back into that kind of loop aspect that permeates throughout the story. And there's part of me that's like, no, Alice, don't go in there. Like that's the whole point, is that you were supposed to get out. Right. And there's also the whole element where Alan at the end brings up, in order for him to get out, does someone else have to take his place?
Well, he thinks that, right? I mean, I think they're starting to crack open, Matrix 2 architect style, that Alan isn't entirely right on the rules. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's their out ultimately, because I think that the Alan that calls from the future in the game definitely sounds more well equipped to handle whatever's going on. I suspect that's, in the epilogue of Alan Wake 3, something along those lines. But I do think that Alan, I think I've lost my train of thought is what I think. I do think that I really have. Sorry.
Oh, don't worry. It's all good. Yeah. So
I'm sure that was going to be brilliant, but it's gone now.
Yeah. Well, if it comes back, just say something. No worries. One thing, since this is a good pivot point that I know we need to talk about, even though we could talk about the story all day long, is combat. Because this is another area, I know I'm the Debbie Downer of the podcast, as much as I freaking love this game, is I am pretty mixed on a lot of the combat. Which is funny. What I told Holly after I beat it, I said one of my main things is that in both Alan Wake games, I have major problems with the combat, but for completely different reasons. In that Alan Wake 1, while I think is really cool, original, is that it gets too repetitive and kind of becomes too actiony for me. And then Alan Wake 2, it specifically becomes it feels more clunky. And I know, Gene, you had tweeted about Alan's movement and I guess Saga by extension be feeling a lot more sluggish. And I think too, Ben, I know I talked to you about this, is that there were times specifically when I was playing as Alan. I'm trying to remember exactly. I think this was in the hotel. There was a scene where there were so many enemies and I had so limited ammo and I was getting destroyed over and over and over. I was peeking in and out of where the light was to try to take out all the enemies. And eventually I just said, fuck it, and ran. And it was totally fine. And then I thought, well, was I always supposed to run through this scenario? Was I supposed to beat my head against the wall and kill everything? Or should I have had more of the survival horror mindset in some cases where you're just supposed to run through? And Ben, I know you were frustrated with that too, right?
Yeah, I don't know if frustrated is the right word, but yeah, I definitely didn't like it, if that makes sense. I think that the main point for me was that sometimes you could just run right through the shadow enemies, at least when you're playing as Alan, and it's totally fine. But then occasionally there's an enemy that's going to actually attack you that you're not going to be able to just run through or run away from. And so my problem was that there wasn't a visual or otherwise identifier of which enemies you actually are going to have to fight. And maybe if you linger long enough, some of the ones that you thought were passive actually become aggressive. I don't know. I didn't do that. But I know that there'd be times where I'd just be like, I have 6 bullets right now. I can't take all these. I have 1 flashlight battery, 6 bullets. I can't take all these guys out. So I'd try to go, the path with the least amount of enemies, and I'd be fine. And then you get to the end and there's one guy who's like gonna come at you, and there's no visual distinction between them. So that was one of my issues. I personally know that many people had complaints about just the fact that the combat is so different, and the fact that the combat is probably less emphasized in the second game than in the first. And for me, I like that. That was a preference for me, because while I agree with Gene that gameplay is king and a game isn't good if the gameplay is bad, I very much more care about story. I respect gameplay, but I very much more care about story. So the lack of combat, unless depending on the type of game, of course, but the less I had to spend my time fighting and scrambling for ammo and looking for flashlight batteries, the better for me. So I didn't mind the fact that there was less combat. I just wish it would have been more fluid. And then talking about the actual technical piece of it, there were times where I'd be like trying to aim my light at a specific enemy, and the camera would just kind of get janky and I'd be flipped around. And I knew it was my fault when I was doing it, but the fact that the game recognized it differently than I was meaning it was a little bit frustrating, because I feel like there's other games that have the sense to know what you're trying to do versus what you actually input. So that was frustrating in a sense. But my main critique was that in the areas with many enemies, many shadows specifically, that was my main point, was the Alan combat. When you see those, you don't always know who you actually need to deal with and who you can just kind of meander on by. But my strategy was also just run sometimes.
Can I say a couple things on that?
Yeah, please.
So one, I think that the shadows in Alan Wake's specific area are by design so that you're constantly tense and that you don't have to fight 50 people, but that you're worried about everything around every corner. And I think that that's ultimately a good design decision, but I can understand why somebody wouldn't like it.
Yeah,
I think
it definitely added to the tenseness. Yeah, I would agree.
I think the other thing I would say is that the game tries early on to teach you to run. And I think it probably could do that a little bit better, because I think they intend for you to run from a lot more scenarios than certainly I had a tendency to do. And I would expect a lot of people would have a tendency to do. And so I think you're supposed to stand in the light and let them go past you, and otherwise figure out where there's a pathway and run a lot more, because absolutely it is tuned so that you do not have enough bullets for some of those encounters. The hotel.
So if you kept going into the light, you kept respawning to enemies. That was your mistake.
Yeah, I realized that. Yeah. Eventually, I was like, well.
Yeah, it respawns the enemies. So.
Yeah. But Hoeg, did you have more?
No, I just wanted to say that I think that the Alan Wake shadow stuff is actually one of my favorite parts of the design. Even if I think it's somewhat unfair at times, I think it's great to essentially shine your flashlight until they dissipate like oil on water. And you're like, oh, I didn't have to worry about that guy. And then somebody jumps you from behind because you thought you had passed one that was clear and it's not. I think that that's, again, evocative of what Alan in the Dark Place is supposed to feel like. And I am a story guy and a world building guy first and foremost. I want the gameplay to be informed by what you're doing with your characters in story. I've talked about this with respect to Alan Wake 1 and with respect to The Witcher, where I like those combat solutions to what they're trying to tell you about being a Witcher or being Alan Wake. And I think this game does that. It's a very different game from Alan Wake 1. I like the clunkiness of the combat insofar as I've always liked it in kind of Resident Evil. And it's smoother than like Resident Evil 1, not that you would expect it to not be from a game from the 90s, but it does have that I have to be very cautious about what I'm doing. The one thing I don't like as much kind of goes back to that maximalist critique, which is that I think Alan Wake 1 is very pure in its light and darkness, and you know where the shields are, and you see the little lens flare pop up and slowly shrink when you're getting that shield down. And the graphics are so much improved in Alan Wake 2 and so naturalistic that for the most part, I still struggle, even playing it now, to decide whether somebody has a shadow shield on or not, or whether they just look like weird monsters. And so I do think there's a little bit of kind of UI player information loss there in the realism, and they might go a little bit too far there. But overall, I love the graphics of the game. I love the way things look. I love the lighting. It is so dramatic and not at all trying to be not artistic. I love the reds and the greens and things that they use throughout the game. But I do think from the actual standpoint of fighting Taken, it might be a little bit too subtle.
Gene, I referenced your tweet earlier about the sluggishness of the movement and how that can kind of affect combat. Did you feel like that was a big detriment to things, or did you get used to it as you went through?
I definitely got used to it. When I was tweeting about that and the bugs, it was me being skeptical of Alan Wake 2 being so good. And that was me trying to go into it being like, you know what? Let me try this. Let me try this out. So that was me trying to kind of figure things out. And also the fact that I had just played Alan Wake 1 and Control right before. So I was definitely doing my homework, trying to make sure that I was on the up and up on the Alan Wake 2 lore. And I was surprised to see how sluggish the controls felt because of Alan Wake 1. And people are crazy to reply that Alan Wake 1 did a control amazingly. The amount of control and the degree of variation that you have on that flashlight in Alan Wake 1 is incredible, and it is better than most 2023 games, period. It is so fucking good, the control. And Control itself was controlled so amazingly, Jesse Faden was just a crack shot in terms of just being able to spin around and shoot things. So, you mentioned, Ben, earlier about being able to spin around with Saga. Like, it was funny to see before the patches when I would spin around in Saga, and I would see her head spin around. Yeah, and everything. So I was like, okay, Remedy is not used to making a slower game. I think that's what the issue was. In that they've always been they made fucking Max Payne, one of the best third-person shooters, one of the first and great third-person shooters in the history of the medium, So they know how to make a good controlling game, and I think they were trying to basically, hold themselves back and try to remember, okay, how does Resident Evil 2 feel, And they were trying to replicate that. And I think there were some missteps along the way. Ultimately, they patched things up, and I do think that the game feels good. I don't think the gameplay and the combat is the strongest thing. I just think that it's just part of the thread that ties the game together. Yeah. And it's fun. I like how grounded and physical it feels. It does feel a little bit closer to like The Last of Us, where it's trying to recreate that Cormac McCarthy heaviness of a gun where every bullet counts. So I was starting to feel like every bullet of my pistol or the shotguns felt heavy. They felt so loud. The mechanics of the weapon itself, you can feel the ping and the cling of it. So all of that stuff really amounted to, okay, I do like this. I don't think it's the best thing ever. Again, Resident Evil 4, Dead Space, those are the pinnacles in terms of control, in terms of survival horror pacing. But I think Alan Wake 2 is just incredible because of everything else it does, on top of being a pretty good survival horror game. So I really just thought it was really interesting that they decided to really try survival horror this time, because they wanted to do it. Remember, Alan Wake 1 was going to be a survival horror open world game, and they realized that was too fucking ambitious, and then barely anyone has even made such a game since then. That's the thing. Like almost nobody has made such a game. Evil Within 2, maybe close. But that's only like, what, a couple blocks? Resident Evil Village. Yeah, sure, they actually did it. But that's fucking Resident Evil Village, Yeah. Other than that, though, no one else has made a similar type of game. So the fact that Remedy was able to tackle it, I was really impressed with how Control back in 2019, 2019, when they, 2019, 2019, when they, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019 how the oldest house was formatted. Obviously, the map fucking sucked, right? Like we all know the map sucked. It was so hard to read, but the actual layout of the building itself and the way you revisited certain areas, I was really impressed with the level design. I was like, wow, I did not know Remedy games knew how to make level design. They knew how to make encounter design with Max Payne and Alan Wake, and with Quantum Break too. And Quantum Break is not a game that I finished. I'm actually trying to make my way through it now.
I like Quantum Break a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's I'm having a lot of fun, but it's not a game with level design. You're just going through the paces. It's very, very linear. And then here's Control with like an actual Metroidvania style oldest house that's like House of Leaves also. That's so interesting. And then now here is Alan Wake 2, where they were really able to flex their muscles and what they've learned and how to make level design and how to make combat feel a little bit more physical. So obviously really not the highlights of the game, but I do think they ultimately made something pretty good. I'm sorry, Rich.
No, I was jumping on you. They were really smart in having you play the levels and then having the flooding recede and have that exploration period where you could go and find the Easter eggs that were often marked with actual sewn Easter eggs because it's Remedy. But I really thought that was a good idea. And I wanted to just jump on one thing you said, Gene, which is that in terms of the heaviness and the Last of Us-ification of the combat, one thing I really liked is that in Alan Wake, dark is dark. Like it is nighttime. It is not a blue cinema scene of darkness. It is black. And when you go to melee somebody with your flashlight hand, you lose visual acuity completely. You lose track of everything.
I love that.
Because the light is actually being rendered. It's not just like a light on your shoulder or something that's coming from your character. And it's really disorienting. And I think that's a great idea for how combat should feel in these types of games. I am reminded of The Last of Us, where you miss the shot and then you have to find a brick and throw it at somebody. It's all this constant chaos when you're dealing with these taken in Alan Wake 2. And I think they did a really good job. I like it a little bit more than you in terms of gameplay, but it's a year mileage may vary situation. It's not perfect. I don't think any Remedy game is. And if you prefer Psychic Ninja flying, the Control is the series for you, not Alan Wake.
For sure. Also, it was interesting that they try to do dynamic loot. The amount of bullets you found really depend on the amount of bullets you have on your person. The balance wasn't perfect. The bullets were fine. It was actually the healing items. By the end of the game, I had like 30 fucking healing items, dude. Like
this was not my experience.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was healing quite a bit, but I also had a bunch too. But I also use the words of power to every time I entered the light, it would heal me. So that was fine. I was always refilling my health.
The words of power, is that Alice? Are we assuming that's Alice with the words of power?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think we know now that Alice was the one guy was kind of writing Alan's path, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think so. That's one of the things that's interesting at the end of the game. I talked about follow you into the dark, and there's some lines about I had to find my own thing that match up with what Alice says in one of her videos that really suggests that Alice is one of the perspectives in that song. I have to guide my love through the dark, of course.
Yeah. So reload your shotgun faster, my love. You know.
Reload faster. I think my favorite one was the tourist map upgrade or whatever that showed me where things were on the map. That was happy.
That was how I got so many fucking healing items, because I got that one and I started sweeping on both maps, and I was like, I just have so much shit right now. It's ridiculous. I didn't even find out the deer, but you find out later that the deer, petting on the deer, just leads you to a room with more loot and ammo and stuff like that. I'm like, that's a little disappointing.
I didn't even
dog side quests.
Yeah, I have not patted all the deer, so
I didn't even know that was going to be a trophy, but I just had to pet the deer because.
Well, I think
you do that.
Again, I think that first song has a line that's like "Follow the deer to follow the owl."
Yeah, I realized that after the game. Yeah, when I was reading other stuff that people had written, but that was cool.
There's a lot of little stuff in there that you can go in and get deeper into the game if you want. Unlike Alan Wake 1, the manuscript pages are not as glowy, so you can walk right by them if you're not paying close attention. And so I like grabbing those. And I think probably everybody on the panel knows what Remedy has said is that their New Game Plus is going to be a little bit like their hard mode from Alan Wake 1 and have some additional manuscript pages and have some changes to the story. Are you all going to play that? Are you interested in that? Are you looking forward to that?
I think I will wait to play it until the DLC comes out, and then I'll play through New Game Plus and then DLC. I probably won't, because I don't want to play it 3 times, at least not in the same year.
I've already played twice, so I'm definitely good. I've been waiting. I started a third one, and I was like, I'm hoping against hope that they shadow drop New Game Plus, but
I think that might be tomorrow.
Yeah,
it'd be lovely. But then knowing that they actually added more story bits into New Game Plus, I'm like, okay, I really hope that they have that cooked and ready. Then, otherwise, as I understand it, the actual DLC, Night Springs, fucking brilliant name for the DLC. Oh my god, it means so much. It's heavy with meaning.
Negative. Not enough Night Springs in Alan Wake 2 right now.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. So that will fix things. But as I know it, they're going to be using the next year to make that. So it's going to be a while before we actually visit the town of Night Springs. But I can't wait because Night Springs is everything.
Is it Balance Slays the Demon that has the lyric "Night Springs when bright falls"?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that line was actually in the game too. It was after you find the 2 murdered cops in the theater. The completed poem, "The Night Springs when bright falls." Oh, so good.
I'm frustrated because I would want to play New Game Plus, but I want to play on my PC this time because I played on PlayStation because convenient. I want to be able to sit on my couch, but now I want to see it in all of its glory on PC. But
path tracing.
Then I would have to, I think, play twice in order to get to New Game Plus to get to the new stuff, and I'm not doing that.
That, and you also have to buy a game from the Epic Game Store.
Ugh. Yeah, you would have to do that.
Well, the fact that it had all these server problems in the last 2 weeks too, so it's a single player offline game, but you need to be connected to fucking Epic Games to be able to play it on PC, which is fucking ridiculous. Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous.
Hey, you can either have that
because it's also the best version of the game,
Yeah, I mean, it's either that or on PlayStation, maybe your account's going to get banned, and then you won't be able to play anything either. So. Shout out to Alan Wake 2's being only digital. I saw some people wrote in about that, which I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's worth getting into really on this spoiler cast, but yeah, I definitely saw some stuff like that. Guys,
I can understand not liking it, and I can understand the business proposition for smaller studios to like that as a release strategy. So I'm on both directions here.
Right. Also, real quick, Colin was bitching about the lighting and the shimmering. To each his own. I will never make fun of anyone who just has a hard time about any aspect of any game. I get that.
Sure.
And I also think he's right that I was playing on the Xbox version, which is basically identical to the PS5 version. Very, very shimmery, but I was playing on a quality mode. And then also correction to Colin, he said that there was ray tracing. There's no ray tracing in the console version, not at all.
Isn't there like some level of software ray tracing?
No, not at all.
In the Northlight engine?
Northlight engine, yeah, but not in the console versions. No.
Okay.
And then the quality mode actually has better LOD and more grass than the performance mode. So if you played in performance mode, we're seeing less shit on your screen. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Well, Dustin.
I played it through in quality mode and my second playthrough in performance. I think they're both good, but I do think that the engine in general has a kind of sparkly feel for textures from certain angles. The way
it's the FSR. It's the FSR that's not properly scaling up the lighting. So I think that's mostly an FSR problem than really is Northlight, I think.
And I will take your word for it, gentlemen, because I will vouch for it being sparkly, and that's as far as I can go.
Yeah, it's definitely sparkly, which was distracting. I do agree that it was distracting, even in.
I think it worked better in Control, where it's a building and you're mostly looking at textures that are tile and things like that.
Exactly, versus like natural sunlight in like a cabin or whatever, and it just looks super sparkly. It's like, oh, okay. Like I definitely see the issues with that. So, I wish Colin finished it. I wish Colin is able to power through. One thing I know about Colin is that he can't go back to 60 FPS. It's like, what's wrong, dude? You were playing 30 FPS for the last like 8 years.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you can't go back to it. I don't know about that, man.
You got to give it a minute to flip over. Dude, I can still play Bloodborne.
5-10 minutes, man. It's fine. Like it'll be fine.
Yeah. Ben, you were gonna say something.
Well, that's really what I was gonna say. Is I think you were trying to wrap it up a little bit, but because so many people wanted Colin on the show and he's not here because of his the hangups, which I'm not saying are invalid, but the hangups with the technical stuff. I know that each of us had briefly mentioned at least some technical issues with the game, so maybe that'd be a good place to go.
Yeah. I the thing about the shimmering, I definitely saw it. It's definitely egregious in very specific scenarios in the game. For example, when you're down in the morgue and there's lots of reflective surfaces in the dark, it is super weird looking. But overall, I didn't have too bad of experience, other than, Rick, you and I had the same problem with the game breaking bug where you have to get through the ride, that you have to stop at the right point, where mine was broken so bad that all the cars were stuck, but the ride was moving. And then they fixed it pretty quickly, but
the same night that you hit that area, I think. Yeah,
that was weird, dude. I wrote it into existence, just like Alan did. I wrote about the fix, and there it was.
Here first, Last Stand Media is the dark place.
Dude, Last Stand Media is the fucking dark place, let me tell you. So yeah, guys, I want to I guess this is a good opportunity. If there's any major things that we haven't touched on and you would like to touch on, now's the time.
I had one last thing I wanted to mention. As a negative, I love this game, obviously, but I do think the jump scares can be a little voluminous in parts. Yes. And I don't mind jump scares that much, but the way that Alan Wake 2 is structured is that they're completely separate from what you're doing. They're just loud videos that play at various points during your playthrough. And especially in Valhalla, the old folks' home built for the Odinsons, they have jump scares at almost every interval of both the usual Alan screaming and I think Cynthia Weaver, who they did dirty in this game, screaming on your screen. And it's often a physical response. They often get you, but it's not particularly earned. It's just kind of going to a Halloween movie kind of jump scare. And I don't love that. It didn't bother me. It doesn't detract from my score, but I do think that it got to be a little much in places.
I agree that at some points it felt good. You're like, oh, you got me. And it was like, oh, let's go, like, but then other time it's just like, if someone is in your face going, like randomly and flashing you in the face, it's like, okay. There were certain points where I was desensitized to it and no longer scared me, but then they give you enough time. Ben, you and I talked about one where it's the part where Saga is looping in the well. It's like she has to go down in the well. There's one jump scare that you trigger by holding the button to go down the well. Yeah. And that one, I needed a breather after that. That pissed me off.
I generally don't like jump scares. And very few people don't get scared by jump scares. But I find them the lowest form of art, I guess you could say. My wife is a big horror movie fan. And for the most part, I don't like horror movies that have jump scares for the sake of jump scares. I like being scared by the plot. I like being scared by scary stuff in the dark. There's enough scary stuff in Alan Wake that I didn't need them to be like jump scare.
Exactly.
Like,
it's an intense game.
It's intense. Yeah. But I just didn't feel like they fell into that trope that I just don't really see a lot of value in. Because it's scary in the sense that it gives you an adrenaline rush and a panic attack. It's not scary in the sense that as soon as it's done, I'm no longer bothered by it. I'm bothered by the creepiness of the plot and the shadows all around me and evading them and fighting them. When you give me a jump scare, it's over. And then I'm not ever going to be scared by that again. At least if I play the game again, I won't be scared by it again. Guess what? Next time I play Alan Wake, it's still going to be creepy. But it doesn't, the jump scares are, I don't know. I find them, I feel a little bit with jump scares, and maybe this is a little harsh, but just like you're stooping to the lowest common denominator with those. And I feel like that devalues the art instead of makes it more scary.
100% agree with everyone. The Valhalla old folks helm was scary enough as it is, and I think Hoeg brings up that, and also Ben really put it amazingly that if it's a jump scare, it's over, right? But there was one of those full screen jump scares when you're in the basement, when you're in the basement of the old folks' home. I'm already fucking creeped out by the fact that I'm in there, right? And the scary part for me is that I'm in this basement and it's surrounding me, and there's a fucking movie projector, and we can talk about the movie later. But there's a movie projector. There's Vlad's dead body there. I'm already freaked out, even though there's old people upstairs that I can just run to. That's already freaky. That's staying with me. That the stink of the scare is on me. But then they had to ruin it with a jump scare. I'm just like, that was one of the ones that didn't get me. The ones that did get me were the first one when Saga is looking for Nightingale, and that was really the first time it kind of happens. And I was already kind of on edge looking for Nightingale, and then that happens. I'm just like, okay, got me there, and it still sometimes gets me,
Yeah, no, that one gets me every time. You step into the water and Nightingale pops up.
Yes, I always have to mentally prepare. Okay, it's about to happen. Okay, there it is. Okay, I have to remember and be conscious of that and guard against it. And then definitely the well one, and then the one where Cynthia Weaver shows up in the old folks' home when she's in the second floor.
There, yeah.
That was scary because you thought she was a normal person and she said something weird and boom, that happens.
Well, she was she was a normal person in the first game, right?
She was a normal. Well, she was kind of normal, but she was a regular. She was a regular human being. Right.
It wasn't normal. She was hoarding light or something, if I remember.
Yeah. Hanging out at the dam or whatever. The jump scare that did get me was fucking Ati behind me when I tried to open the spiral door. Fuck that part. It's particular. That's the reason why I thought that the old folks' home was scary, because not a lot of stuff was happening, and then fucking Ati just shows up at behind you. I was like, Jesus Christ, dude. Ati, I love you. I feel safe around you, but don't do that again.
And then he gets downstairs before you somehow.
That room's not for you,
so
Saga.
Crazy.
Yeah. And dude, and him fucking he's not doing karaoke at the one. He's just singing in the one bar.
He is. He's singing Nightless Night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to say and I'm like, nope, I'm not finished.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it, man. Do you guys like the movie Nightless Night? Did you guys watch
didn't even watch it. I meant to watch it after.
Yeah, no, it's very good. And
you had to watch it afterwards, Dustin?
No, I meant that I bypassed it, and then I'm trying to remember. I remember thinking I don't want to sit here and watch this right now, but I do want to see it. Mm-hmm. So I was planning on just trying to watch it on YouTube later, and then I forgot.
I wish it went in the menu. I wish it went into your TV.
I wish it to go in the menu.
Yeah, that would have been way better.
It's one movie that doesn't go in. Yeah.
Did you say you enjoyed it for indulgent pretentiousness?
No, I said it. I enjoyed it, though it does have indulgent pretentiousness. Yeah. It has that art house movie feel, but parsing it out as to Barbara Jagger and Alex Casey / Max Payne / Tom Zane and all this stuff happening in that movie, and of course ending in the same way that the game winds up ending, is really interesting.
I was just laughing because that's a lot of times when I tell Dustin to just enjoy the movie, I think of the phrase indulgent pretentiousness. So that's
No, the whole time I was playing this game, I was like, man, this game is so up its own ass. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it though. I love it. That's fine. That's good.
It does feel that way a lot, but I like it. I can get upset about that particular vibe when I feel like you don't actually have anything to say. And to me, Alan Wake 2 winds up being that they had something to say. In fact, we didn't get into it a lot, but I would argue that the Alice Wake, Alan Wake relationship is, as I said, both romantic at the end, but also a metaphor for a codependent, problematic, toxic marriage relationship, especially when you don't know the whole history of Scratch. Right. That it's really diving into some serious stuff in that plot line. But that particular movie is exactly what you think of movies that are going to end with the word fiend, right? They're trying to hit a specific vibe to say a specific thing about Tom Zane, the filmmaker auteur. And so that's all informed by that rather than just doing it because they want to be self-indulgent and pretentious. So I think that works really well. The only part where I thought they worked a little too hard in the game itself and were a little bit up their own, as you say, it was We Sing. And that's just because it pulls so neatly out of the game that I think it was just really showing off what we can do, which I'm happy they did because I'm glad it exists, as I said. But overall, I think tonally it's got a lot of indulgence. But my favorite game last year was a game called Immortality. And nobody would accuse that of not being an indulgent mess. But I love that game to death. So.
All right. Well, on that indulgent mess, or I was thinking not indulgent mess. I didn't mean what you were saying. I just meant
lawyers. It's what we're known
on your
for.
indulgent mess of what you said. On that note, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any other final things we want to cover. I guess that was Hoeg's thing. But Gene, did you?
I'm trying to think of something else. Yeah, I mean, there's so much in this game.
We don't
Warren
have
Door, the nature of him. You know.
Being Saga's dad.
Definitely Saga's dad. Come on, you know.
Yeah.
I love when he was saying there's thousands of people helping you, which is like, of course, you know, all of us, the players, helping Alan Wake to fucking get through this shit.
You don't even know what's under your mask.
Yeah. Really, 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 really good stuff. And the fact that he's like mentally torturing Tim Breaker, who's Jack Joyce, the main character of Quantum Break. And then he's seeing a redheaded woman, which could be Beth Wilder, which was his friend from Quantum Break, but also, of course, is the same actress as Jesse Faden.
That's the interesting thing about the Remedyverse, right? Is they have so many crossover actors. That's also part of the disorientation and confusion, which is like they have the book that you find in the door makeup room, which is from Casper Darling, which is the scientist from Control, but is also actually the actor that voices Alan Wake. So, I mean, there's all these things that are just really bizarre.
Exactly. And the fact that Tom Zane was voiced by Max Payne in Alan Wake 1, but he's fucking now voiced by the body of Alan Wake's actor in fucking Alan Wake 2. It's like,
right. Well,
even just like saying these things out loud makes me feel like an insane person, you know?
Right. And we don't know that the diver is technically Tom Zane. That's gotten a little bit more attenuated after Alan Wake 2.
I mean, there was a bit in Control where Jesse Faden talks about her favorite poet, and then they're like, or her favorite filmmaker, and they're like, filmmaker Tom Zane. No, Tom Zane's a poet, and she was like, oh, I guess I'm misremembering that. And so even it's funny that Alan Wake 2 makes the nature of Tom Zane even less clear than it ever was in Alan Wake 1,
which is impressive.
Which is impressive. Yes, I think that to Hoeg's point, the disorientation is the point. You know, I think we're not supposed to know the true nature of Tom Zane. Was he a poet? Was he a filmmaker? Sometimes that shit gets lost in the weeds. You know, sometimes the image of ourselves gets out of control. Look at what happens with Colin. You know, is Colin racist or misogynist or not? Who knows? But there's a version of Colin out there that's walking around, you know? So.
There's a Mr. Scratch version of Colin?
Yeah.
That's the Reset Era version without a beard, is the Mr. Scratch of Colin.
That right now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Colin's a perfect example of this, right? Like the fact that he has completely lost control of his image, and there's a different version of him out there that people see him as, you know? Which is crazy.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
It happens. You know, it's reflected in real life.
For my money, Tom Zane's still a poet, and when he wrote himself out of existence, he made himself a filmmaker that also made a film about Alan Wake.
But the film is based on a novel by Alan Wake.
I understand that, but Alan Wake is a creation of Tom Zane, maybe. Or Tom Zane's a creation of Alan Wake.
How do you know that, though?
I'm not committing to any of these things. If Remedy doesn't commit, I don't commit.
Well, I mean, the fact that they had to look up the wikis to get shit straight makes it feel like that they're having fun.
They are. That's the best part of Alan Wake 2.
The best part of the game.
The whole thing is you feel like you're on a ride with people that are in that room where you see it in the video of Tom Zane and Alan Wake in the hotel room, that this is what Sam Lake and his writing staff look like, and you're just along for the ride of people having fun. And they're at the top of the game, and they can hit all these tonal shifts, and it is a great experience to have. And if you made yourself to this portion of the video, you've spoiled it for yourself, and I'm sorry for you, but you should absolutely experience it for yourself.
Also, Alan Wake 2 is the best argument against the anglicization of the word sauna. We never. Yeah, why the fuck are we calling it sauna? You know, we should be all going to the sauna. The sauna.
Yeah,
we should all be hitting the sauna. Why don't we just fucking say it like that? What the fuck's wrong with us? You know,
a lot.
Well, I do want to go to the sauna. They made it sound so refreshing and good. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
Ilmo and Yako, new characters. They just fit right in.
I want the Alma beer too. Alma beer. You know.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's get out of here. We've now gone into the minutia of the word sauna, which might be a cue. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but that might be a cue to wrap up at this point, or I'll get into her saying Saga Anderson again.
The most important point. That is the biggest takeaway of this game. Is that we should have been saying sauna the whole time.
Let's go around and say goodbye to everybody. Ben, thank you for being here. Any final thoughts?
No, thanks for having me. I really like this game. I love the conversation around it, and after 2.5 hours, I feel like there's 2.5 hours more of things to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy to have been on, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that can occur in the future.
Hell yeah, Gene. Closing thoughts and goodbye.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad that we can finally talk about this out in the open. And yes, again, please read my review, hopefully in the description below, and let me know your thoughts. Leave a like and a comment on the YouTube channel. It definitely helps us out a ton.
Hell yeah.
YouTube loves it when you tickle its buttons, folks. It really does.
Oh,
push the buttons. It is the ritual to lead you on, or to lead us on to great success. Basically,
it is.
Hoeg, the last time I saw you, the only time I've ever seen you, was at Colin's wedding on the release day of Alan Wake 2. So it just goes to show that you were, you were conflicted that day, but you chose Colin above Alan Wake. So that's
I think Hoeg actually said the words, "I can't wait to get home." At Colin's wedding, he did say to play Alan Wake 2, but he said, "I can't wait to get home." That's all I remember from Colin's wedding. So
it was pretty funny. I think I texted him and said, "It's Alan Wake 2 release day." It was great to play Alan Wake 2. It was great to converse about Alan Wake 2 with all of you. I think it's got enough in it for another 13-year wait, but I very much hope that we don't have one for more of the Alan Wake universe.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dustin, for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
Hopefully
I hope this game sells well, man, because I've been seeing reports that it doesn't have a lot of engagement, and the Game Awards is probably going to lose Baldur's Gate 3. So I hope it wins some awards, and I hope it gets some attention, because guys, like this, I haven't had a game. We talk about Kojima and Sam Lake. I haven't had a game make me feel this way since Metal Gear Solid 2, which is huge. That's a big thing, So
hopefully, whatever awards it wins will get it some attention and get some purchases as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, thanks everybody listening out there, are the patrons of Last Stand Media. And eventually you're going to be able to listen to this on free feeds. If you're a free feed listener and you want super early access to our Spoilercast, they first come to patreon.com/laststandmedia, where you can listen to those early. And if you're already there, thank you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back soon with, I don't know what the next Spoilercast is, but we'll be back with more Sacred Symbols Plus. So thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.